Hello, Topical, and welcome back to your favorite podcast where we delve way into the nitty gritty and we hopefully avoid the nitty gritty. So, we're really excited today because I have somebody that I've been hoping to have on, frankly, since I started this podcast. She may not go by her given name, but her name does inspire a lot of what it is eponymously Hope. So, are you excited to be on?
I am. I'm flattered to hear that you wanted to have me on for such a long time. I never got an invite, so I just assumed that you didn't want me on your podcast.
Oh, well, how many people? Okay. You meant this podcast. Yeah, well, you know what? When you got like 50 people to sort through, there sometimes it goes by the wayside, but hey, it happened.
Sad.
Okay, so let's get started with something interesting. So we basically haven't talked for like a year and a half. So what's changed about you?
Well, I dyed my hair red. That's probably the biggest thing. Um, I'm starting Winter Guard this year. Our uh, Clover Hill has its first indoor color guard competition team, so that's been really fun. We've competed in three competitions so far, and the Sunday of spring break, we are actually headed to championships. So it's pretty exciting.
Oh wow, I guess I'll start there then. So I didn't even know you did color guard. So what exactly is that?
So during the football games, when the marching band is performing, and then the people spinning flags in the background, that's where those people.
Oh, okay. So you're like the people in the front of a marching band that are just twirling the flags.
Yep, we
Okay.
twirl flags, and we this year we started twirling rifles as well. Well, I should say spinning. In guard, you spin flags and rifles, and then the baton twirlers twirl the baton.
Okay, that reminds me of a SpongeBob scene where like they're in the marching band, and then like the guy starts spinning the flag way too fast, and he crashes into a blimp. Hopefully, you guys don't have such accidents.
Well, it kind of depends. Sometimes they're accidents, and depending on what band member you're nearest to, they might not be accidents.
Okay, so what's your favorite story from your time at Color Guard?
One of my guard boys broke my nose this year
Oh,
with a
oh,
flag.
how do you?
We were performing this maneuver where you're in like a side plank position, so one of your hands is on the ground and you're kind of a little bit off the ground, and then you use your other hand to spin the flag around you. And I told him he was too close to me, and then he hit me square in the face with the flag, and I was right. He was too close to me.
Well, I guess you showed him.
Yeah,
Hopefully, you showed the doctor too. So didn't Yash also break your nose in like freshman year when you were playing Ultimate Frisbee?
I did break my nose in freshman year. So this year would mark the third time I have broken my nose.
Hmm. What was the other
But
time?
the first time I was about 7, and I was climbing up the bar stools we have at our island in my kitchen, and it fell on top of me,
Oh,
and I caught it with my face.
well, hopefully you were successful. So like, what is it like to break your nose? Have you broken any other bones?
No, I've only ever broken my nose,
Okay, so I
uh,
guess you can't compare it then.
so I don't have any comparison to it. But I've always been lucky enough to break my nose cleanly enough that it never bled. Because
Wow,
when
it's
you break your,
impressive.
the reason it bleeds is because the cartilage in your nose has shifted and punctured the skin. It doesn't bleed because the bone itself is broken. So every single time I got hit dead on, and it basically means that I've always just it hurt a lot, and no one else was causing pain but me.
Okay, so like it was a bone in your orbital, your orbitals, and not like the actual bone, like the nose.
It was right across the bridge of my nose.
Oh, okay, so it's that one. Gotcha.
So rather
Hopefully,
than like in hockey where you get hit kind of coming from the side most of the time, I just got hit straight dead on.
okay, that's convenient. So hopefully that didn't leave you like Dumbledore.
No, no.
Thank goodness.
I have regular looking nose, and they've never had to reset it in place. So that's always been nice.
No, those rhinoscopies are no fun.
No.
Uh, so and like what was the actual procedure for it? Like, did you have to wear like a cast or anything?
Actually, no. All 3 times it broke clean, they just told me there was really the best thing to do was just let it heal, which is not the answer you want, but
Yeah.
it healed every time where it was supposed to, so I guess it went okay.
How was sneezing with it?
Painful.
Okay.
It hurts. Blowing your nose is worse though, because sneezing at least over, but like blowing your nose, you have to cause yourself the pain.
Oh, yeah. You'd think they would just give you a vacuum or something. Like not that that would be more socially acceptable, but you know.
That's true. I have to excuse myself to the restroom every time I need to blow my nose.
Yeah, that can get really bad in some winter days.
Yeah.
So, something else you mentioned was you chose to dye your hair red. So I've talked to Amber about this choice a little, but I'm curious to see the background for you.
So my hair isn't quite as red as Amber's hair. Mine's like a more auburn shade, I guess you would say. But I've always loved dyeing my hair. I started doing like bits of it in different colors in about sixth grade of middle school. And I just find it, another fun way to express myself. I mean, we have pretty much unlimited ways to change your physical appearance, and this one happens to just not cost as much, and it's fun. It's interesting. Good conversation starting.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to get into that later, but I want to stick with just recapping because honestly, I feel like it's been the longest time since we've talked. So
I
like,
know.
so how was junior year? Like, how did it go academically?
Academically, with the small exception of physics, junior year was really good for me.
Okay, so I guess I'll just go for your schedule then. So like, what classes did you take?
Okay, so junior year, I took field biology, I took physics, I took trigonometry, English, orchestra, and photo.
Okay, so what'd you think of Harvey?
I like Miss Harvey. I was a big fan of hers. So our parents actually already knew each other. They do this Catholic church event together called Curcio. So I've technically known the Harveys for a very long time. I just didn't know I knew them because our parents already had that connection. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that must have made for an interesting first day.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I do actually already know you.
Yeah. Okay. So, did you enjoy trigonometry compared to other math classes you've had?
Yeah, I feel like I was better at trigonometry and algebra than I have been at geometry, and then I'm taking honors calculus this year, so I found that to be challenging enough for me. So I'm kind of glad that I'm in a lower level math because math has just never really been my thing. So I liked it.
Yeah, it's still better than those people that are just taking stat instead of calculus.
Yeah, no, I did not want to take stat.
Yeah. Are you doing honors calculus with Mrs. Harvey? I know she teaches a block of that.
No, I'm doing it with Mr. Kennedy.
Oh, okay. How's he?
I like him. He's kind of all over the place at times, but it's his first year teaching calculus, so I can't really blame him.
Yeah, that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
So, what'd you think of Mrs. Clopton last year? I know you're taking what is it?
Math English
Yeah,
class.
yeah. That's how that whole switch went. So, you've had her for 2 years now.
Yes, I love Miss Harvey, Miss Thompson. I find her hilarious. She's a really great teacher, especially this year with our smaller class of 20 and the fact that there's no real set curriculum. It's been really great because we get to read books that everyone actually enjoys and not just books that we kind of have to read.
Yeah, like last year.
Yeah, like Grapes of Wrath, for instance.
Yeah.
Did not enjoy that. But this year we had to read more fun things like we've read Death with Interruptions and The Handmaid's Tale and Running in the Family and other more interesting books.
Okay. Did you enjoy The Awakening last year?
I did enjoy The Awakening. I thought it was good.
Did you think she died at the end?
I'm assuming she did. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
clear. It's pretty clear that it's a suicide act.
Yeah, because it got pretty heated last year in our so in Math Sci, a lot of what we do to discuss books that we read or like manuscripts or if it's Faust's class, a bunch of history papers was
Mm-hmm.
is that we do like Socratic seminars where we all sit in a circle and we just raise our hand and talk about it, or in Clopton's case, we don't raise our hand and we just voice our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super annoying because one of the kids last year, she was convinced that whatever her name was didn't die at the end of the book, and it was like some kind of power stance by Chopin. And everyone just started nodding their head, even though 10 minutes earlier they were all saying that that wasn't true at all. And like I was the only person who stood up and like, no, she died. She committed suicide. She walked into the water because she was giving up. And
Right.
like,
I agree.
yeah, it was ridiculous. It wasn't as much of a power move though as putting up the what was it, the compromise of 1820 on the board.
Yeah.
So let's see, where should we go from here? I guess we can get into Doctor E. So what do you think of him?
I was not his biggest fan. Um,
Well, what about as a let's start with him as a person.
I don't think he's a terrible person per se. I think he has a weird sense of humor. I find hard finding funny. Really, it's nothing wrong he's saying per se. I just don't get his sense of humor. So I don't think he's a bad person necessarily. But I also don't believe he's really cut out to be a teacher.
Oh, okay. Do you think that the whole fiasco last year worked in your favor?
Just a different sub.
Yeah, like so. For those who haven't heard the previous podcast, basically what happened in our physics class last year was Doctor E was out for about 5 months with a brain tumor, and not fun stuff. It was like right around the brain stem, so there were a lot of concerns that, especially among parents, that he would come back senile or something. But
Right.
basically, what happened was that it's very hard to find a really reliable physics sub. So we were taught by a 90-year-old man. He was literally 90 years old, maybe 89, but you get the idea. Who hadn't taught physics in like 20 years, and he kind of bumbled his way around while endearing himself to everybody. Him being Mr. McNear, and then after that, we had everyone's favorite sub. Yeah, I don't remember his name actually. What was it? Yes, Ramsdale, the so-called teacher who had never gotten a problem wrong all through high school, and then proceeds to get a problem wrong 5 minutes later. So this guy was so concerned with his self-image that he would literally alter the math like midway through a problem so that he would be getting the right answer, even though he would just start changing positive and negative signs. Even God, he was a big problem. I mean, at least he was trying to teach physics, but I think we were so much better off just having the smart students teach the class, which was basically what happened under Mr. McNear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but when Dr. E came back, I feel like it almost said everyone, at least they accepted later on the fact that they weren't really going to bother to learn physics rather than immediately at the beginning of the year. So at least they got some foundation, and at least they learned about the what is it, the I don't know, wherever the most basic calculations are for finding forces, and oh, if somebody shoots an arrow up in the air at 45-degree angle, how far is it going to go? Like at least they had some background, and if they don't know E and M or whatever, that's fine. They can learn them physics C if they want to. But it seemed like Dr. E's biggest problem was he didn't really want to teach to students that didn't know the class and the curriculum already. It seemed like he wanted to teach to people who already had some background or some specific interest. And obviously, some teacher, well, every teacher wants to be doing that. Nobody wants to be trying to persuade someone to even be interested in your class, much less learning the stuff they're trying to teach. But it seems like he was much more forthright about it.
Right. There's a difference between wanting kids to enjoy your class and only paying attention to the kids who enjoy your class.
Yeah, and like specifically the people that only like you, and like it's pretty clear based on the people in Physics C right now that like those were the people that were actually getting something out of the class last year.
Right.
So let's see, what other classes did you had photo? So what'd you get out of photo?
So the first year in photo at Clover Hill, you only do um, film photography. So you get to work in a dark room and you get to learn how to develop film and create rolls of film. So I thought that was really interesting because it gave me a whole new respect for the photography process because nowadays with our, abilities technologically, you can just snap 500 photos and keep one of them. Back then, you really couldn't do that. Even getting one good photo was a process that took days. So it gave me a whole new respect for photo in that sense. And what was nice is it forced you to really think about the pictures you were taking rather than just taking them, like the composition. How did they look? How did you frame it? Where were your photo principles? So those basic things we see in photos, like the variety of images, or all the shapes kind of the same, things like that that we notice but we don't really think of. So I really loved photo. Unfortunately, I was planning on taking it again this year, but with my schedule, it just didn't work out. But I still very much enjoyed the experience.
Oh, that's a shame. Then I'm sure you learned a lot about the importance of light, especially in high-speed photographs, and how light and like the amount that you can actually get on a photo is the real limiting factor in that. Oh, can we get the shutter speed high enough, or
Right.
yeah, because it's ridiculous. I saw a fantastic video on that not earlier, like a year ago or something, and that was really my experience in photo and just giving me some kind of perspective on how like even high speed photographers or just someone working in the industry, the kinds of things that they have to think about. Because as you said, it's something that's definitely taken for granted today.
Uh-huh.
So what initially led you to want to take the class?
Well, I kind of had space in my schedule for an elective. I didn't really know what else to take, and I've always found photography to be mildly interesting, so I figured it was a better use of my time to take something I already had some interest in than just leaving it up to chance and taking a random class. And it ended up working out for the better because I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So you also took field bio, and I know that's something that
Yeah.
like I always tease people about. So like, what did you really get out of the class?
Well, I want to go into marine biology when I'm older. So while field biology is a little different, it did help give me a lot of good base tools I can use for as far as like species memorization and identification. And there are definitely things that will I can take from field bio and apply to marine biology. And it also helped reaffirm my love for science and just remind me how much I do love being outdoors because sometimes with the workload we have at school it's hard to get that opportunity, but now, the workload was being outside and it was just a really great class. And Miss Johnson's obviously very passionate about teaching it, which makes it more fun because she actually likes what she's doing.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything that you thought could have been done better with the class, or was everything just as good as you could have or have hoped for?
It really was as perfect as I could have hoped for. This is a class she's been teaching for a long time, so it's very much a well-oiled machine at this point.
Okay, great. Yeah, like my problem with it always was for students that wanted to take like general biology or something, they would have to wait another year, or like really just the pointlessness of memorizing a bunch of names. But if you actually want to go into biology, that's and like field biology specifically, or marine biology, as you said, just anything where you have to index through these specific species, that's going to be a useful tool.
Right.
So, hmm. So, like, what was the structure of the class like on any given day? Would you like spend all the time outside, or was there like, okay, 2 days a week we're gonna go outside, and then another day we'll be in the class talking about biology?
Well, it kind of varied. There were days we did spend more time inside, sometimes mostly because of the weather, but every day that we could go outside, we did. The main point of the class was to be outside learning rather than inside learning because for the curriculum, a lot of it was based off of what we found species wise when we went outside. She had a general idea of when we would be learning certain groups of species, like all the spring wildflowers, all the bird calls, the frog calls, trees, winter trees. We actually identified how to learned how to identify different types of twigs
Oh,
rather than just
okay.
the leaves. But to teach us those things, she would take us outside and show us to them rather than just pointing to them on a slideshow, which I appreciated because I'm more of a tactile learner where I like those physical examples that I can use to help me remember things better. So it really worked in my favor in terms of memorizing things.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, and it definitely is nice to be outside. Did you have a favorite organism that you saw throughout the class?
Um, we caught a few snakes, and I really like. I'm a bit of a snake person. My mother and grandmother are not, so clearly I missed some sort of gene I was supposed to get that's opposed to snakes. But we caught a little rough green snake, and it was to me the cutest little tiny snake because they're garden snakes. They're very small,
Yeah.
no longer than a foot, no thicker than a pencil. That was probably my favorite just because we actually got to experience it very up close. Actually, I have some cool pictures of me holding said snake.
Oh, okay. What's the biggest snake that you've held?
The biggest snake I've held was probably the corn snakes that they have at the Science Museum.
Okay.
So those are a little big, a little longer and a little thicker.
Yeah, I've held cordon snakes. They're like
Yeah,
it's not like holding an anaconda or anything, but yeah, it's like a good experience with snakes, and no corn snake is gonna bite you. That'd be ridiculous.
right.
So, what specifically do you like about snakes? Is it just you find them cute, or?
I just find them interesting because they clearly, are intelligent creatures who have an ability to think and assess situations that to for their own personal survival. So I just find them interesting from that aspect, considering their physical biology is so different from our biology and how we see the world and move through the world. So that's
Okay.
what I like a lot about marine animals because a lot of marine animals are very intelligent creatures, but in our human pride, we always, assume we're the most intelligent creatures. But since intelligence is a concept and not exactly a quantitative thing, it's interesting to see how something so different from us can act and rationalize in ways that we can very much relate to.
Yeah, definitely. So then you also took a history course. I believe you took honors with Mr. Fout.
I actually had honors U.S. history with Miss Brown. She was new to the school last year. I really liked her. She didn't assign a textbook because she was like, this textbook is old and outdated, so I don't really plan on using it, which I was a fan of.
Yeah,
I'm
that's a
not a
strong
big
choice.
reader. And then she did a lot more classic. There was more discussion in the class rather than just straight lecture, which I enjoyed. So I liked her a lot.
What was your favorite lesson from the year?
From history,
Yeah, yeah.
hmm, if I'm being honest, I really can't remember. History has never been my thing, which is why I took honors history. So I wouldn't really say I had a favorite lesson.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
The
Yeah.
class was enjoyable to the point where I wasn't irritated that I had to take it, but not exactly memorable.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. Did you have a preference between Mr. Fout and Mr. B in terms of history teachers you had?
Um, I didn't really like either of them. I know most people loved Mr. B, but I was just never the biggest fan.
Oh, okay. That's
So
interesting.
I didn't really have a preference.
Oh, what didn't you really like about Mr. B?
He was just too loud for my taste.
Okay. Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's definitely something he was, yeah. Yeah, like Mr. B's comedy style is like he's gonna try and like surprise you and like just like
right,
exclaim something that you didn't expect or it's kind of like how a child does it to be honest, but he was a lot more mature with it.
right,
Yeah, for me, I really liked Mr. Fout as well. I never liked how long he would go about his stories because like it would always push us up against the clock, and then
right.
that really came to a head by like the last 2 weeks of school, and we had to just spend the entire like just every class frantically trying to copy down stuff about Charlemagne and the Middle Ages Europe, and
I agree.
that definitely wasn't fun. But aside from that, I really enjoyed his Socratic seminars.
I did enjoy the Socratic seminar. It was one of the
Yeah, they were fascinating.
first that I ever had the Socratic seminars. It was in that you actually voice an opinion in class rather than just this is the opinion I'm going to tell you and you're going to agree with it because you're a student, not a rational.
Yeah, no, that's never fun. Here, I'm gonna hang up on you and call you back just because you've been breaking up this entire time.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure how much of that was screwy on your guys' end, but for me it was just like a weird white sound in the background, and then it just started getting really bad in the last minute. If it remains, I'll try calling her on the phone.
Okay.
Let's see. Sounds fine now. Yeah. Well, I'll see if it pops up again, and if it does, I'll just call you on the phone like I had to do for Zach Gager. So,
Okay.
I think we missed one class that you took last year. Any idea what that would be?
Orchestra.
Orchestra, yes. Okay, so I did want to get into that one. What was your experience with that, and why'd you take the class?
So I've actually been playing the violin since about, I would say, fifth grade, but because of various scheduling issues, I've never really had a chance to take an orchestra class before. I was actually taught by a student at Cosby's as my formal teacher, and then I moved on to playing music with my church for a long time. So I took it because I finally have the availability to actually have that quintessential orchestra experience. So I did a private audition with Miss Gordon, and then but Mr. Williams was my main teacher because he had just become the orchestra teacher. So
Yeah.
I really liked Mr. Williams. He definitely has a passion for orchestra, so you can tell he really enjoys doing orchestra. He's a very upbeat person, so at times I'm a little annoyed just because I typically have him in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. He's a morning person, but I really like him. And then he actually started this thing called Orchestra Council. So it's basically a group of meetings that he's interviewed and elected to kind of help him with the more like you know managerial parts of orchestra, like planning events and helping organize concerts and things like that. So he can focus really on the music aspect of it. So last year I was the orchestra council librarian for our music library, which was quite a mess. So I had to do an entire online catalog of all of it. And then this year, the current librarian is working on organizing the physical library. And this year, I am the council president, which
Oh, good
is
for
very
you.
I enjoy.
Yeah, I can see how. Here, I'm just gonna hang up and we're gonna switch to the phone because it didn't get resolved at all. Dang it. Okay, this is the second podcast we're having technical issues on. Hopefully it's interesting to you guys that that's happening, and I'm enjoying the talk so far. But let's hope this resolves the issues. I'm not sure why. I was trying to figure out. Oh crap! I just called someone random. He's gonna be super confused now why I called him. Uh, that was weird. Okay, let's hope this works. Hopefully it's not as staticky. I know the one with Zach, it was staticky, but it was definitely better. Okay, good. You're not Alex Buchanan. Okay, that's an improvement. Hello?
Hello.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear you for a second.
You're good.
Okay, so I'm just gonna hope this fixes the issues. If it doesn't, well, we're gonna roll with it anyways.
Okay.
What do you like about the violin? I know it's very dependent on like how well you can just finger the violin and like how good your control is. Because like it's only you only have so many strings, and then like
Right.
it's not that much fretting compared to like other string instruments. It's just very much like how much can you control the vibrations of it.
Right. I like the violin because I think it's interesting that an instrument that's so simplistic looking on the outside can create such a wide variety of tones and sounds. So, like, when you see like a clarinet or a saxophone with a lot of keys, it makes sense logically in your head that it should be able to make a lot of different sounds because you have more to work with. Whereas with a violin, it just feels more like it should make less, have a shorter octave range because you're working with less. But in reality, we can play about the same amount of notes. So I like the fact that it's almost a surprise to people with how much you can do with 4 strings and a piece of wood.
Yeah, a bit unassuming. What initially led you to the violin?
I've just always found them to be very pretty and appealing instruments. So I'd wanted to, I'd always done chorus because I've always been able to sing fairly well. So, but I wanted more out of my music education because music has always just been a really big part of my life. And I was just always drawn to the violin.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Do you listen to a lot of violin music in your free time, or is it just something you like playing?
A little bit of both. I do listen to a decent amount of violin music in my free time. Not as much true classical music. A lot of orchestral covers of songs that I know. Groups like the Brooklyn Duo and Two Guys and a Piano that do those kind of arrangements. But I do listen to a lot of actual classical music as well, mostly out of necessity than
Yeah.
true enjoyment, but I do enjoy the music as well.
No, that makes sense. And like for me, the only thing that really led me to classical music was probably because my parents played it when I was young, and the fact that I've played the piano for so long that like you don't see a lot of piano covers. You see a little bit, but not as much as
Right.
for other string instruments and like
Right.
rock-based instruments.
Uh-huh.
But for me, whenever I'm playing the piano, the biggest thing has always been just improvise. Playing someone else's pieces isn't nearly as fun as just having it come out of you and just getting as invested as you can in what you're playing. Do you get similar things out of the violin, or are you more a fan of playing pieces?
I like playing pieces. I've gotten fairly good at sight reading pieces. So typically, if I hear a piece and then I have the music in front of me, like the sheet music, I can pretty much replicate how it's supposed to sound. Just from doing church music, a lot of times you realize that the songs you learned in practice aren't the songs you're actually playing during mass. So you've got to pretty much learn them on the spot. So, again, out of necessity, I've learned how to do that. But I enjoy more so playing the music than learning about the logistics of the instrument per se.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Not a lot of people realize how hard it is to sight read when you're playing music. But yeah, it's not an easy thing, especially when you literally have not looked at the piece before you started playing, and like
Right.
you just start playing and you're like, oh, here comes a big
Uh,
jump, or oh, I got to do that. I didn't see that coming. Like
right.
how far ahead are you looking when you're playing? Like a couple measures, or is it just like measure by measure?
Well, for church music especially, typically I can look a few measures ahead because they're songs I recognize after they've started playing, just from having heard them before all my life. We've been churchgoers my entire life, so most of the stuff I've heard before. Not that I still don't enjoy it, but at least it's more familiar. But with true sight reading, it's line by line and measure by measure. You just do the best you can, taking it one step at a time.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of violin music do you prefer the most? Like, do you prefer like more powerful music, or like more like furious, where like you're yeah, it's just like going really quick and like you have to just keep up with it, or do you prefer like a slow, methodical song?
I really enjoy more intense pieces. We played this one piece at our fall concert on the Hill of the Mountain King, I think it was called, that I really enjoyed because we had played before that piece this one called African Song and Rounds that was a lot more delicate. So we played this very delicate and more traditional sounding music piece and then kind of jumped into this much more intense piece that, physically playing it takes more out of you. There's definitely, a physical wear and tear to your, you know, energy when you're playing. So I really enjoy more intense pieces because I feel like it keeps the audience more engaged, which is why we played, a more delicate piece and then brought them back in with a more intense piece.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree with that. There's something too, like actually having to exert yourself when you're playing a piece to really get you into it. And like if you're on the piano or something, have to make like a giant jump across the piano or like doing
Right.
like a long trill. Like that's a lot more fun than just doing like a emotionally impactful one where like just
Exactly.
you're just like bracing yourself for like 10 measures for like a chord that's coming up. And like yeah, like those have always bored me. I love just almost scaring people with like how fast it can go.
Right.
So what do you think got you into music originally? Was it a similar experience where like your parents would always play it for you?
Yeah, my dad has always been a big musician. He's played saxophone pretty much his entire life. So when I was little, I didn't listen to as much little baby music. I listened to more adult music. So it's the things that they liked that they knew were appropriate for me and my younger brother. So just by pure nature of always living in a musical household, I fell in love with music as well.
Okay. Is your brother interested in music at all?
Yeah, he plays the baritone in his school band, but he's actually quite good at rapping,
Okay.
which is surprising for a tall, skinny white dude. But hey, everyone's got their thing. So he doesn't as much write rap songs as he can just perform them very well. So when we were younger, me and my brother used to put on so-called performances for my parents where I would sing and he would rap, and I'm sure there's some embarrassing recording of it somewhere, but I'm not so inclined to dig it up.
Yeah, you can count on that. So what was you, what how do I want to address this? So what was your initial experience with show choir?
So initially, I loved show choir. I always loved singing, like I said. I found dancing enjoyable, though I wasn't always the best at it. So show choir, just from the performance I had seen and what I've heard about it from older friends who did it, just seemed like the natural step. But as I became more involved in the Clover Hill show choir program, I fell more out of love with show choir, not necessarily because of the physical performance itself, but from the more political side of things, where, there was definitely favorites, and I definitely wasn't one of them. And when I was a freshman, that didn't bother me as much because I knew that, it was probably just because I was a new student. Miss Thomas didn't really know me yet. But as my sophomore year progressed, and I realized that despite everything I was putting into show choir, I wasn't getting back what I felt like I had earned based on my commitment. Like, my parents were at as many competitions as they could, and we were always volunteering, and I was always making sure I wasn't missing practice and really putting everything I could into show choir. But Miss Thomas just never seemed to really like me, and eventually it just started taking a more mental and emotional toll on me, and I realized that wasn't healthy for me anymore.
Yeah, like at some point that stuff just isn't worth doing if they're not gonna throw a bone once in a while.
Exactly. That's why I like orchestra so much, because um, even though I'm in the lower level orchestra, concert orchestra, I'm a section leader there. And as orchestra council president, Mr. Williams really respects my opinions and my ideas for the orchestra, because he realizes that the students see a different side of the orchestra than the teacher does. So even if that's not necessarily a negative side of the orchestra, there's things that we see that he doesn't, so he's able to use our opinions and really listen to us to improve the orchestra, just because there's things that he'll always miss just from being drawn into the teaching aspect. So I feel like I'm getting something out of the orchestra. I'm not just putting everything into it with no reciprocation.
Yeah, and it's always so important for the people in charge to have some level of trust of their understudies. Like, trust is one of the most important virtues that anyone can have. Because,
Exactly.
like if you look at almost every situation, it's going to become like it's going to devolve into a conflict or a problem, or it's going to go bad one way or another when someone either doesn't trust somebody or like it all just comes down to like trusting the fact that okay, if you're either honest with this, then it's going to work out for you, or if you're honest with yourself and like, did I put in enough effort that I should be expecting a worthy return on this? Or like it's just so much a game of do I trust myself and do I trust the other people around me?
Right. And I've always been a big believer in, no matter the age of a person, I feel like respect is something that should be mutually earned rather than just given based on an age gap that's, with adults and kids. Obviously, I try to go into a situation with the mindset that the person I'm talking to or interacting with deserves respect.
Yeah, you
But
just
with
have
Miss
to.
Thomas, it was harder and harder to keep that respect for her, because I didn't feel like I was earning any respect from her. I was just giving it without reciprocation.
Yeah, like I'm the same way with that, and like even though I give people respect initially, like it very much plays into my philosophy of like you're not entitled to anything here, and
Right.
like you just have, frankly, you have to earn whatever it is that you want, and if you're going to justify the fact that you should have power in a situation because of some arbitrary age, and like that's just silly. You prove yourself every day, and like it's something that I try and take upon myself as well. And like when I'm like in an elementary school or something, I try and remember that and say, hey, if I was a first grader or something, I don't know that this kid knows more than me. I think that my ideas are just as valid. I try and Give him the
Right.
benefit of the doubt, and if he's like, "Oh, I ate a dinosaur for snack time," well, then that changes things a little bit. But like you gotta give them their due diligence.
Right. You don't want you want to be a better role model to kids than little younger kids than people might have been to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's just so much of learning from the lessons of your past and like what you can think about and trying to apply it into your life. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time.
Right.
Okay,
You're
so
wasting other people's time as well.
yeah, absolutely. So let's get back into this school thing so we can wrap up all the backstory stuff.
Okay.
What classes did you take this year? We already addressed Clopton again, but and the honors calculus. But what other classes did you take?
So I'm taking honors government with originally Mr. Short, but we now have a long-term sub because Mr. Short has Parkinson's disease. So
Oh,
unfortunately, he's taking medical leave in order to receive a more intense treatment that will hopefully allow him to continue teaching later on. But right now, it's best for him to not be teaching. But so far, our long-term sub has been decent. I have some issues with him, but it's only been about 4 class periods, so I can't really judge him quite yet. So that's honors gov. I'm taking dual enrollment biology this year, so it'll be the third time Miss Johnson has taught me. Obviously, I'm loving that. I love Miss Johnson. I love biology, so that's probably one of my favorite classes. One of the ones I actually really care about anymore. If I'm being
yeah.
taking
Don't worry. That's how everyone is right now.
taking orchestra again, so that's really interesting. I'm still really enjoying that. What else? Oh, I'm taking psych, so that's good. I've always found psychology very interesting. Our local library has a really good psychology section, so I would just check books out of there and just read it out on my own free time. So it's interesting to actually receive a more formal education. I think that's everything.
Okay. So, yeah.
English, orchestra, history, math, science, like anatomy. I'm taking honors anatomy. That's the last one.
Okay. Do you feel like you've learned a lot in anatomy?
Oh, definitely. We've
Have
got to we've got to do a couple dissections too, which I find fun.
Yeah, those can be interesting. Like it seems like it goes pretty 50-50 with people whether they get grossed out or they actually get engrossed in it. But do you enjoy molecular biology more or field biology?
Well, it's not molecular biology, it's just general biology. So I enjoyed field biology more purely because we got to go outside more. However, I do find a lot of the things we learn in regular dual enrollment biology to be really interesting. I've learned a lot from that as well. So it's definitely not a waste of time.
Yeah, no, certainly not. What's been your favorite unit so far this year?
Genetics. I
Yeah.
love genetics. I find it really interesting.
Yeah.
It's, it's interesting, how just a very small error can unfold into a much bigger issue. Just one mistranslated letter can throw off an entire sequence of proteins and throw off an entire gene. So I just find it interesting that it's kind of a condensed butterfly effect, if you will, where, one wrong flap of the wing sends the whole world
Yeah,
chaos.
the butterfly effect always makes me uncomfortable just thinking that that can be the case, but yeah, from just a control freak like me, but yeah, genetics has always been the unit that I've always been most curious about seeing the layer behind it because for all the other units I can imagine, okay, maybe we could have talked about a couple more enzymes with the Krebs cycle or oh, okay, central dogma. She was really specific about what she could have gone into more depth on
Uh-huh.
or but with genetics, I feel like the only thing that could have gotten talked about more with was cancer, and like a lot of that is speculative. So it would have been really interesting to see what her thoughts would have been to take it more in depth if she could have.
hmm
But in terms of my favorite unit, what would that be? Probably just cellular respiration just because I like systems, and it's cool to be able to see like every normal step that's occurring, and the fact that like this is how energy is actually created, and like
Right.
that's a weird thing. It's like, what is energy? But that's more of a physics question than really a biology one, so it doesn't have to
Right.
get too complicated. And it really at the point that physics is at right now, it's more of not a physiological, philosophical question, just because it's so speculative at this point with how not in depth it's going, but just how microscopic it's trying to get.
Right. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed cellular respiration as well and photosynthesis. This year, in freshman year, we had to just memorize the steps, but this year we're having to memorize like the individual proteins and the exact enzymes that it takes to get from step to step. So it was definitely more in depth, but not without purpose. I didn't feel like she was just making us memorize things for the hell of it. It had an end goal. There was reasoning, which I've always enjoyed about Miss Johnson, is that I've never really felt like, with the exception of maybe one or two times when she was sick and she didn't really didn't expect to need a sub plan, that we've done busy work. It's all had a defined purpose.
Yeah. Do you think freshman year she could have pushed us to a dual enrollment level? I know logistically it never would have happened, but do you think we could have handled the curriculum?
I would have to say no. I mean, obviously we were still all very smart freshman year, but even now as a senior, I still struggle at times to keep up with the pace of things, especially closer to the end of the year with all the snow days having thrown us off in early January. That we're right now, for instance, we're going through an entire chapter of evolution each day, each class period. So, we've been doing a flipped classroom where she gives us a PowerPoint that we have to go home and examine and read and study. We take a short little, daily quiz on it, and then we can get into more details on that specific subject and then do more labs. But I don't think in freshman year I would have had the ability to keep up with all of that.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I would have been fine with it. I think that chapter 5 stuff that was just brand new to us, that would have been brutal. Because, like, even this year, I barely understood what was going on. And then some of the last stuff with the central dogma, but that really just came down to me not studying enough for that test.
Right.
But, yeah, I think you just have to push kids as hard as you can early on, because it just sets them up for a better future later on. And I
Yes.
feel like it's a weird thing this year that like we've been taking such a similar curriculum to what we had freshman year for biology, and I wish at least we could have just gotten like an AP credit for it.
Right.
I wish she pushed more people to take the AP biology exam after freshman year. I didn't have much of a problem doing that junior year after basically not studying for it and just going off what I learned from freshman year.
Right.
But what do you think about AP classes and AP exams? Do you think it's a worthwhile thing for schools?
I think it's a worthwhile thing for schools, and especially for students who are genuinely interested in that subject, because you can also, earn college credit for it. Like for example, I got a 4 on my AP Lit exam last year, so I get 3 college credits for that. So that'll be nice because hopefully it can put me in a slightly higher English next year rather than having to take just basic college English again. So I think they're really good resources for people who are genuinely interested in certain topics, because you have that ability to go more in depth, and actually you get something physical out of it in the term of college credits.
Yeah, that's definitely the use of it. And while it is weird that they teach to a class, I feel like all classes are doing that at this point, and the fact that it's just called AP class is more of a stigma than anything.
Right.
But was there a reason why you went for the avenue that you did for English this year?
Um, I kind of wanted a more relaxed class. Most of my schedule was still fairly intense. I know I took mostly honors classes where everyone else was taking 20 APs, but even though I know reasonably that I'm more intelligent than the general school population, that I'm just not at that pace that other people are. But I like Miss Clopton. I like the way she taught things, and I liked having those more open seminars. And even though, I was originally expecting Miss Klein to be teaching the class, I'm definitely not disappointed that we ended up with Miss Clopton. I think it's been really good, and I definitely like the class. And I always have time in college to go back and take college level college composition, but I won't have the chance to go back and take Math and English 12.
Yeah, that's a good point. How did you feel about the whole changing that it had this year, and do you think they handled it the way they should have?
Yeah, originally I was upset just because I was really looking forward to having Miss Klein again, and I heard that you would do a lot of fun things in Math Sci English 12, like analyze movies and whatnot. But we do a lot of similar stuff in Miss Clopton's class. We watched Big Fish earlier this year, and we analyzed that for different archetypal themes and things like that. So I think they did a really good job with handling it. I don't think anyone was particularly happy at first, just because you don't like being told one thing and then getting a separate thing.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
know Miss
definitely
Klein
worked out.
wasn't. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh,
Yeah, you basically just don't like being told one thing and then getting a totally different thing.
yeah, and that's definitely something you've seen in AP Psych, I presume.
Right.
So, like, what have been the three biggest things that you've learned and applied to your life in some way that you've taken away from AP Psych?
Well, for me personally, without going too in depth, I have had struggles with mental health over the past couple of years, but since I'm so intimately connected with my own mental health, sometimes it's hard when I'm reading things to look at them from a more objective standpoint. But since in this case, being taught it as a class, Mr. Clark doesn't have a deep personal investment in my own mental health, which is totally fine. I wouldn't expect that of a teacher. So it's nice to learn these things from a more scientific and objective standpoint, which has helped me not necessarily overcome my struggles, but it gives me more information about, okay, so I can reasonably logic, this is where this is coming from, and I'm not, completely crazy and it's not all in my head. There is actual scientific problems going on here that I can grasp better. So it's helped me gain a little more control. And then it's just also interesting too to see when we learn about different manipulation techniques, for instance, like foot in the door and things like that, where you can see them more in real life.
Yeah, or just like matching
Especially in
somebody's Yeah, continue.
Yeah, especially in advertisement.
Oh yeah, that was always my favorite lesson from Mrs. Curran. To be honest, I thought it was the only useful one we learned. But like, it's fascinating seeing some of those mental manipulations and like, oh, if you match, oh, jeez, sorry about that. If you match someone's body posture, they're more likely to agree with you. Or oh, if you I don't know, like wear red or something, you'll be deemed a more likely candidate. Or just
Right.
it's stuff like that where it's like, oh, wow, this his brain is really predictable. That's a little concerning, but
Right.
yeah, I can see the great use in just alleviating the feeling of helplessness, because that's, if you don't feel like you can do anything about a problem, you're not going to try and do anything about it. You're just going to either live with it or you're not, and yeah, that's not really a good option either.
Right.
So let's see. What else? What was another class you took this year?
I think we've pretty much covered them all.
Oh, okay, cool.
Except we did anatomy, we did government, we did English, math, orchestra, biology. I think we pretty much covered all my classes.
Okay, sweet. Anything else that's really changed about you in the past year and a half? Any things that you've changed your mind on, or uh,
Uh,
yeah, stuff like that?
Not really. It's been kind of a fairly consistent year for me, which has been good. Nice to have a little bit of stability before, everything changes next year with COVID and whatnot.
Yeah, speaking of which, are you excited for it?
Yes, I'm very excited for college. As much as I love Midlothian, I have lived here my entire life, having only moved about 10 minutes away from my previous house. So I'm excited to really explore, a new area and uh, just be somewhere different for a change.
Yeah, definitely. I can see the use in that. And like, where do you have any idea of where you're going yet?
Yeah, actually, I do. I learned late November that I got accepted into my dream college, UNC Wilmington, which is in North Carolina. So I am enrolled there, and I will be attending this fall. And then I'm also in their one of their learning communities. So it's basically a dorming option where you can apply to be in certain specialty per se dorming areas like the STEM one I'm in. So you get to room with people who are studying similar fields as you, which will be helpful in terms of finding study groups and learning what uh, classes are better than others, what teachers are better than others. So I'm excited about that as well. So I am very excited for college.
Yeah, I can see how. What's the biggest thing that you want to change once you get off to college?
Um, Really just looking for a change of location more than anything else, just to, move states for starters and just be somewhere totally different than what I'm used to and just immerse myself in a new local culture and a new town.
Yeah, I can understand that. And like for me, in my schooling experience, it's been so important to have moved around and like go to a new school where nobody knows me and like I can just if I want to make a change about myself, I can. Nobody knows the difference, or just
Right.
learning to adapt more and just being in a situation where like you're okay heading off to college because you're like okay, I've already done this like 3 times. It's not that big of a deal, not with moving away from family, obviously, but in every other respect, certainly.
hmm
But what classes are you looking forward to most in college? Just the marine biology stuff, or are you looking forward?
Yeah, mostly just the marine biology stuff. The UNC Wilmington campus actually has a marine biology research facility as part of their campus. It's a huge facility. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I'm excited to be able to hopefully volunteer there. That even before I move on to earning my master's degree and moving eventually into the work field, I'm hoping that I can get my name in some places just by volunteering. So come time to move into the work field, I'll have more connections and more people know who I am, so I'm able to get where I want faster.
Yeah, and that would certainly be helpful. Nobody wants to be waiting for a job for the longest time.
Right.
But what do you I'm gonna stop beating around the bush. I've been wondering about this entire time. So, I don't know if you noticed 2 weeks ago, but Plants vs Zombies 2 came out with a new feature called Battles. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, you haven't. You'll have
No.
to check it out. It's fascinating. It's
Okay.
basically what I thought Plants vs Zombies should come out with for this entire time. It's a player versus player system where
Oh, interesting.
yeah, unfortunately, it's not an iZombie mode, which I was really hoping for. That's basically what they have on the DS, and it's amazing.
Right.
It's just who can rack up the most points by killing the zombies when they're farthest away from the house, obviously, over a
Uh-huh.
period of 3 minutes. And then like they have a whole like relegation system, which is a sports system that they use in English football, where
Uh-huh.
basically just if you're the worst couple teams in a league, you get moved down. If you're the best teams, you get moved up. It's been so much fun to do so far, and it's really gotten me back into the game.
hmm
So, do you play video games much anymore?
I used to play Minecraft a lot, but not as much anymore. But Maggie Miko, has actually introduced me to Overwatch, which I really enjoyed. And then over winter break, Nathaniel Sauce forced me to play all of Portal with him, the first Portal. So that was really interesting. He keeps saying he's going to invite me over to play Portal 2 with him, but that has yet to happen. So I enjoyed most of those games, but as far as just on my own time by myself, I typically don't play video games, but I enjoy playing.
Oh, that's really funny. I didn't know you guys were close. How did you meet him?
Nathaniel and I had math together last year, so we kind of knew each other through that, and then for some, just random reason this year, we suddenly clicked all of a sudden. Now, we talk all the time, and we spend more time together, which has been nice because I don't typically have many male friends at any given moment, so it's always nice to have a few around just for the variety.
Yeah, I thought for the longest time that I had the opposite problem, but I feel like it's finally kind of balanced out a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. Hmm. Do you think that? Hmm. How do I want to broach this? Okay, so, what was middle school like for you?
Middle school was interesting.
Yeah, terrible, just like for everybody else.
Not necessarily terrible. There were a lot of good parts in middle school that I definitely enjoyed a lot. I've made a lot of good friends in middle school that I've kept for a long time, like Andrea Connor, Julia Wolver, my friend Rhiannon. I don't think you've ever met her. She goes to Maggie Walker. So there was definitely a lot of good that came out of middle school, but it was definitely more of a exploratory period in my life because I was going to Manchester Middle, which wasn't my districted middle school, but since I was in the CBG program, that was the closest CBG high school. So there was more exploration in the fact that I was being, put into school with a lot of different people from a lot of different elementary schools. So there was that aspect of it, but it's not something I want to repeat anytime
Yeah,
soon.
and a lot of different criminal backgrounds.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Manchester was an interesting place to
yeah.
be.
So I've heard. Yeah, just last year I had to go ref up there, and I couldn't believe how terrible the school just premise looked. It was like a
Yeah.
prison.
Yeah, no, the school itself definitely looks run down, which is unfortunate because I think that can a lot of times contribute to how people view the school. Because even though those things are mostly out of the general population's control, people view it as more of a ghetto school. So, I mean, kids kind of see it as, well, people already think we're ghetto and people already think we act this way, so why act any different? So I think that definitely has had an effect on the general behavior of the students just because that's what people expect of them, so it's easier to act that way.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that middle school is a good premise, and like that is how society should be setting up its schooling system,
Um,
or at least compared to the system that was before it? Of you go to elementary school until I believe sixth grade, and then you go off to junior high for seventh, eighth, and ninth grade, and then you do high school 10th, 11th, and 12th.
I kind of like the way we have it where it's, K through 5 is middle school, 6, 7, and 8 is, K through 5 is elementary, 6 through 8 is middle school, high school is 9 through 12. Because I think it's a good interval of time where, like, you have a little bit longer in elementary school because you're adjusting to being in school, and then middle school is a little shorter because, it's more of a transition period in your life, you know, from a more general standpoint, and then high school's a little longer because you've got more of your life at that point to kind of settle in and figure out. So I like the way we've divided up school. I think it's fairly effective.
Yeah, definitely. Is there like one big thing that you think schools are missing right now that they should really implement, make them better?
I know probably a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I honestly think we should be using less technology in school. I think that, technology is obviously a very great and powerful tool, but a lot of times I feel like teachers lose sight of what it means to be a teacher and are more inclined to just, let kids watch a video or look at an online lecture or do an online assignment rather than that face-to-face connection and experience that you don't get with a computer. So I think that teachers um, should at points cut down on their technology use just because there is a significant difference in learning from a human being and learning from a computer.
Yeah,
That would be my big thing. I also think that, we need more updated resources. Obviously, most of our textbooks are years, if not decades old. the information's outdated and a lot of times disproven. So, it's harder for teachers to teach in that sense because you have to use what you have, but the resources you have aren't always very good.
No, and that's definitely understandable, and I think that's a lot of what teachers are talking about right now. I had a really good conversation with Mr. B the other day about why technology is causing a lot of problems in the schooling system and how a lot of the administrators right now are all young college students that are like just coming out with like computer science degrees and like how they're pushing for even farther for technology, and their perfect system would be where teachers are basically gotten rid of and people are learning through Khan Academy, just in like all classrooms, just have people with their headphones on Khan Academy, and just a bunch of administrators walking around the classroom to make sure everyone was doing work.
Right. People are by nature social creatures. We were designed to interact with other people. And I think the more and more you remove other people from that learning equation, the more and more you lose almost your humanity in a sense, because, the way things operate online are different than the way things operate in the real world. And a lot of times learning those real world consequences are very important because you need to learn that what you can do on the internet isn't always what you can do in real life. And I think the classroom is a good way to learn those things because it's a more controlled environment where the consequences are lesser and there's someone more forgiving to teach you those lessons that you might not be getting elsewhere if you're just learning from a computer that really doesn't have the capacity to tell you off or teach you about those more abstract lessons that you learned throughout your school years.
Yeah, and that's a good point about humans being inherently social. I feel like what they're going for with the technology thing and having everyone learning on their own is to solve the problem of pacing in schools. Ultimately, that's not that much of a problem at the lower levels, but it definitely is at the upper levels. And also, they're trying to go for the idealized system of education by I believe Aristotle, where everyone has their own philosopher that is teaching them their education, and everyone can work at their own pace because of that. But obviously, when you try and implement an idealized system, it brings real world problems into that, and that obviously being some people don't want to learn and they're being at school anyways. And something that I think has really persuaded how I look at schools is the thought that schools were designed more as a daycare for parents than as an actual education system, and the fact that it's adding education to these kids is a secondary benefit to the fact that it's eating up time for the parents to work.
Right. I think part of too with the pacing issue is a lot of that is being, in my opinion, is being resolved by, the ability to take, advanced placement classes and dual enrollment classes or start college earlier. Like I have a friend this year, Ruth, who is actually graduating a year early. So she'll be graduating with us, even though she's been in high school for 3 years. So a lot of those things are being resolved without having to compromise the human aspect of education. So I think that's good too. You have to look at the fact that in those senses, our education system is still working, and that technology, while having a great benefit, isn't necessarily solving the problem as much as we would like it to.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing right now in the American education system where it's using all the most up-to-date tools and technologies to teach an outdated system. So,
Right.
like, a system that's based more on like what the industry wants for its workforce for the 1960s to like the 1980s, when all of the people who were originally in charge were designing the system, and
Right.
that is the benefit of having a bunch of young people in power now at the administration level, is that hopefully that can get updated. But it seems like right now they're a little too focused on just bringing the best tools to the specific classrooms. and
Right.
and that's definitely something you see in our school, and not other schools, other countries right now, is that they're very focused on making their school systems the most up to date that they can, and having industry leaders in communication with them, and being like, hey, what do you want out of your workforce? And like, I don't necessarily agree with the argument that we don't pay our teachers well, because if you look at other countries, they pay them about the same, to be frank with you. But
Hmm.
like it's definitely important to have a better system of evaluating teachers because you can just see like some teachers that don't care about what they're doing at all and they're just doing the job because they
Right.
know that they can get 3 months off for summer and that nobody's really going to be checking up on them, especially if it's like an honors class or something,
Hmm.
or heck, even if it's like a C level class. Like, you forget about that sometimes, but there's always a lower level.
Right. I think a lot of the problems too is we're so much teaching to this strict, SOL curriculum, and you can give a student as many standardized tests as you want, but it's standardized testing isn't and hasn't been the most effective method of gauging teacher effectiveness for a very long time. And I think we get so caught up with being the best and having the best scores and the students who are highest on whatever index or whatever score sheet that we forget that you still have to teach real people. At the end of the day, these aren't robots, these aren't just numbers, they're actual people. I think that's why having, teachers like Miss Johnson and, Mr. B and people who are obviously engaged and interested in what they're teaching is good, because obviously people keep coming back to them because they feel like they're learning something rather than just regurgitating a specific curriculum.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It is very important to have a teacher that cares about what they're teaching and that cares about establishing an actual personal connection with the student and like saying, "How's your day going?" or "Oh, what do you think about the lesson that I'm teaching?" or "Oh, next week we're going to be trying out a new thing I've never tried before, hoping that it works because I'm actually trying to make the classroom better and not just trying to make my job easier." Like when you hear stories about Mrs. Johnson coming in and going, "Okay, I was up all night grading these tests. I hope you guys appreciate it." Or, "Oh, it's like month 5 of school. I can't wait for that summer break because gosh, I'm working my butt off here." Like
Right.
it really makes you appreciate the job that they do compared to a lot of these other people who are just doing like multiple choice tests every time because they know that they can feed that into the scantron the fastest, or
Right.
like it just heading home immediately after school. And like
Hmm.
even if like you race down to their classroom, they're already gone. And you're like, "Geez, how'd you get out of here so fast?" And then you see someone like Miss Johnson still here at 4, or even in some cases talking about going to the orchestra performance at like 7 because she's still at school working that hard.
Right, but obviously, she's engaging in more of the student culture. Like, she went to the Crucible recently, which I saw and I personally thought was amazing. But she made a comment about it in class. You could see the people that were in it were glad to know that she cared about students outside of them just being numbers. And while like sometimes all of her tests do have a multiple choice component that she can feed into a scantron, she also always includes a short answer section that makes you really think about the subject and apply it in the practical sense that I always appreciate, because you feel like you're actually able to use what you've learned rather than just regurgitate.
Yeah, definitely, and that's it's such a weird thing that like we expect people to memorize information to show that they've learned something. I guess there was some value in it when you couldn't just Google it, but even still, like, was it that much of a help to have someone be able to tell you who the Persian leader in the 500 BCE was, or
Right.
what's the I don't know what's the third leg of Pythagorean triangle with legs 3 and 4, like that. How I just can't imagine that it was that much of a benefit over just teaching critical thinking. And obviously, it's easier to teach to memorization, but you'd think that an investment in critical thinking would be worthwhile in the long term.
Exactly, because you want citizens who are able to function in society, and having citizens that can think critically about things makes them able to function in society. So that's why I think a lot of what's broken with our school system is more so the fact that you can give everybody all the tools they can use to succeed with all these updated technology, and this is the best testing machine or this is the best computer, but you need to teach them how to use those things effectively. You can't just keep inundating them with technology that they don't understand how to use in a way that still makes sure you're learning and not memorizing.
Yeah, definitely. This is gonna be a bit of a non sequitur, but what do you think about social media today?
I really like social media. I use it a lot. I personally find it very enjoyable because I like seeing these, moments in other people's lives that they felt were interesting enough or cool enough to share with other people. And I think it has a lot of benefits, especially with more uh, picture based medias like Instagram and Snapchat, where it's like all these little small moments that you get to hold on to or see from other people that you normally wouldn't see because they were excited to share them with the world. So I personally find social media very interesting and very useful. Obviously, there are cases where it's misused, but that's going to happen with any form of media. We're human. We're going to find ways to abuse the system. It's not necessarily an inherent evil of social media as it is our own humanity. You know, even when like newspapers were first coming out, people already started using them to slander other people, or people were publishing books about other people that were more negative than positive in nature. It's not while technology has made it, and social media especially has made it easier to do these things, it's not necessarily what's causing these things. So I personally really enjoy social media because I think it has a lot of good in it.
Yeah, absolutely, and specifically if you study something like Gonzo writing, like the entire purpose was to write slander, and just writers like oh, what's his name? I forget his name, but the guy who he would literally just make up stories about politicians because he didn't really care about life, and he was just like, whatever, I'm gonna write something that I find funny, or gosh, I wish I remembered his name. It's not William Randolph Hearst. It's the maybe it was Hearst. He was a terrible person too, because one of the big things with him was, and I thought this was a fascinating story when I read it, was back in the 1920s when they were trying to replace hemp with paper. He was writing a bunch of slanderous stories about how like marijuana would make black people rape a white woman or something, and like how it just a bunch of random crap that about like how hemp was like evil or something, and he actually got hemp, which is just the like obviously you have marijuana, which is the drug form, and that
Right,
smoke and whatever. But hemp just being the paper, like canvas, the stuff that canvas is made out of, and
right,
like just being an actual product. And he actually had the entire both things made illegal. And I was reading a fascinating story about how congressmen who passed the bill, they didn't take the time to read the thing, and they didn't realize that they were making hemp illegal as well as marijuana. So like
right.
that was a really sneaky thing, and yeah, like it's disturbing the fact that people can get away with that crap just because they're oh, Mr. Richie Rich, and they have a pen or whatever, and they're working for a newspaper, and that's helped to inform a lot of why I don't trust mainstream media in a lot of senses.
Right.
Like, do you watch the news at all?
Um, so much as I used to, partially because it honestly depresses me sometimes, but a lot of times it's right because, people fail to provide the full context. So, like, when I'm having, discussions with my parents about things that they've heard in mainstream media, I ask, where did you get it? Who did you hear it from? What other sources did you have that support this, to kind of remind them and myself that you have to look at more than just one news source, because even in the most reliable of newspapers, there's always going to be that human bias error. So I think a lot of times with mainstream media, we just always trust one person because it's what we're used to doing. You always read one newspaper, or you always listened to one radio talk show because you knew they were giving you good information. But nowadays, with the widespread abilities of that technology give us, you have to look at all the sides of an issue to truly understand it. And I think a lot of times people forget to do that. And in cases like that court case, obviously, had you looked at different sources and been able to see more sides of the issue, we may have avoided those kind of problems where people just assumed because this was a person we had always trusted that we can continue to trust them.
Yeah, definitely. And I do wonder how much of it was just we didn't realize how corrupt the entire system was, or if it actually was a noble thing. I'm sure for like 10 years or so it was good, and you obviously had people like Walter Cronkite bringing the hammer down on the Vietnam War. But
Right.
I feel like pretty quickly it just spun out of control, and we didn't notice it until apparently we just had some enlightenment, and now we're able to question all of these things.
Right.
So, hmm. What do you think is the worst social media right now? in terms of like a platform?
In terms of a platform, I probably think that Facebook is the worst social media right now because it's so inundated by the older generation who is more used to just hearing things from one source and being able to fully rely on that one source, that they forget that in our more modern society, one source isn't always necessarily going to be the one truthful end all be all. So lies can get spread a lot quicker through Facebook because those people are used to a different kind of culture that just isn't applicable in our current society. So based on the generational gap, in a way, I feel like Facebook's probably one of the worst social medias right now.
Yeah, it seems like Facebook as a whole just isn't a great corporation. It seems like
Right.
it's just trying to take all the elements of other corporations and make it into something of their own. I think something that's definitely been seen in Instagram, which is a Facebook proprietary that I don't know. I guess they've just kept their greedy mitts off of, and
Uh-huh.
with them borrowing a lot of elements from Snapchat shamelessly and nobody really caring, to be honest. But yeah, it's always better to take a proven product, but yeah, at some point you gotta have some shame.
Hmm.
What do you think about this is a bit beyond the time, but what did you think about that whole launch of the Tesla into space and like the stuff that Elon Musk is doing today?
To be honest, I don't really know enough about that to have like a good, strong opinion on that.
Oh, okay. So basically, most people respect Elon Musk because he's famous for working 80 hours a week, obviously twice as much as most people claim to, and just he's a big not proponent. He's head of SpaceX, which is an independent organization that looks to put someone on the moon before NASA does, because basically he just got fed up with waiting for NASA, and he's doing pretty well for himself because he's rich and he can do whatever he wants. But a lot of people
Right.
respect him because he's one of these rich guys who like claims to be looking out for the common man and like have these noble ideas. And yeah, Tesla was obviously one of his big things. I know I'm forgetting one of his other ventures that he was really big, and I'll look it up. But in the meantime, yeah, he was just a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, so I think that's nice that we have organizations other than just NASA working on space travel, because obviously NASA is not receiving much government funding. So what they're able to do as far as space exploration is limited by that lack of money. But sometimes with, like we were saying, those big corporations that claim to be looking out for the little guy, it's not always truly looking out for the little guy, because you can make the little guy believe a lot more when you make the little guy feel valuable. So I think there also needs to be a healthy amount of skepticism with people like Elon Musk in terms of how pure their intentions really, or in terms of how focused are they on what they personally have to gain from a situation rather than the little guy.
Yeah, definitely. And just looking into his background, apparently he created PayPal. So yeah, that's gonna be a good source of money. But yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, especially if you made it in 2000. Geez, that's just been
Right.
around for all of the internet. But
Right.
do you think that how difficult do you think it is to remain pure when you become rich and like is money all corrupting?
I don't think money is all corrupting. I think a lot of it has to do with how we as people perceive the value of money, because you hear all these like get quick rich schemes on TV, or you read about people in the news who've won these huge fortunes in the lottery, and we idealize and almost worship money and the power that it can give us, where a lot of times we forget that every good has its bad aspects to it. So I think money in it of itself is not corrupting, but it's often how we as people perceive the importance of wealth that in turn corrupts us.
Oh, sorry. Oh no,
Thank you.
aftershock. But yeah, I agree. While it always comes down to the human element, money is power, and power is corrupting. It's one of the worst virtues.
Right.
And yeah, it's incredibly difficult to not use your power for whatever you want when you have it, especially when people respect that power. And
Right.
like anyone who says that like, oh, when I win the lottery, I'm not going to be an idiot with it, even though the lottery's like a silly example, you wouldn't be an idiot with it, or like they say, oh, if I got elected as a politician, I'd be pure and I'd pass all the great bills.
Right. But,
You have no idea how hard it is.
I think a lot of times, people want to believe the best of themselves in a situation, but you never really know until you're in that situation. There's all of these outside factors you have to take into account with societal pressures and pressures from your family and friends and your own personal set of morals that sometimes in those situations, when you're still stuck in that almost honeymoon phase of coming into this great wealth or whatever, that you forget that the reality fails to sink in. So sometimes it's hard to really say one way or another how you would act in a situation until you're in that situation because of those factors that you wouldn't normally consider because you just hear the glorified version of things.
Yeah, definitely. Would you want to win the lottery?
See, that's the tricky thing because I think everyone wants to win the lottery, but like the reality of it is, there's taxes to consider, and the fact that, for instance, in some countries, if you win the lottery, they put like a bag over your head when they air you on TV to protect your identity because people will start coming after you. So, like, in an ideal world, sure, I would love to win the lottery. Obviously, it'll go a long way in terms of paying off student debt and being able to afford a house in this economy and things like that I want for my future. But, I have to consider the reality of the dangers that having that money so suddenly and at such a young age could have. So in an idealized world, yes, but this is not an idealized world.
Yeah, and like obviously, I'm going to fall into the camp of being the idealized person and just being like, oh no, I'd be the good, strong one, and I would say no to all of those family members that I came asking for money. Well, I mean, I know I would do that, but or like wouldn't make any stupid purchases, but it's just such a maelstrom that you can't even predict. But well, you can predict it, but you can't think about how you would act in a situation like that. And it's just even the emotional pressure that it puts you
Right.
under, like just being able to handle that. And that's why you see a lot of them ask for deferred payments, but even still, just throwing away a ton of money on it for no reason. And it's really silly. I do wonder if like there's a happy equilibrium for the amount you can win from the lottery without being one of these crazy $1 billion winners or whatever. Not
Right.
billion. That was a bit much. 100 million or whatever.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's been studies that have proven that the amount of happiness that wealth will give you only goes up to a certain point, and after a certain point you kind of plateau. Like, infinite wealth does not mean infinite happiness. It only works to a certain point. So theoretically there is an ideal amount of money you can win in a lottery that would keep you sane and happy while still being able to enjoy the benefits of a more normal life.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
certainly, and I have seen those studies as well.
mm-hmm. In our get rich fast, instant gratification based society, we're focused on what's truly going to make us happiest, but what seems like it's going to make us the happiest.
Yeah, and it's just so important to put yourself in perspective and admit when you don't know these kinds of things, because
Right.
like you don't want to be one of those people that has like a complex and says, no, I'm all powerful and I know everything. Obviously that's pretty far on the extreme, but yeah, like to an extent. Like, is there a psychology principle that I'm referencing?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. The only one that really makes the most sense in this situation would be relative deprivation, which is based on the fact that you may view your situation as a good situation until you compare it to someone else's situation. Like, I'm obviously happy to be in a more upper class, middle upper middle class family where I enjoy a lot of benefits and things that other people don't. But if, I compared myself to the Kardashians, I might feel like my life is lacking because I'm not rolling in luxury and money and fans and a TV show. So especially in, our society, it's easy to fall into that trap where you feel like your life is a lot less wonderful than it actually is because you're so used to comparing it to other people's lives, which I kind of think goes back to the social media thing, that you have to, remove that aspect from it, that yes, this person is going on this great vacation, but you also have to think of all these other great things that you've done in your life that don't necessarily mean that your life is work just because you haven't done this one thing, because there's a lot of good you probably have done in your life. So that would be, I feel like, the principle that would most apply to this situation.
Yeah, definitely. From an outsider's perspective, like for me, I don't use social media at all. I think there's like two pictures of me on Instagram over like the entire ether, unless there's like some secret stalker that's outside my window right now and is taking pictures of me. Hopefully
I
not.
feel like I have not seen any evidence of said secret stalker, so I think you're safe.
Okay, good. I can stop looking over my shoulder. But what do you think's the biggest thing that someone who isn't using social media should know about it?
That I feel like the biggest thing someone who isn't using social media should know about it is that social media, in a broad perspective, does more good than people give it credit for, especially because our media is mainly controlled by an older generation. You have to take into account that they're going to have a more pessimistic view of things, but I think that the important thing to remember about social media is that it is at its core intended for fun. It's not intended to hurt people. It's intended for people to share parts of their lives that they normally wouldn't get the chance to share with other people because of the effort it would take to send one picture of yourself to your 500 closest friends or whatever. So I think that would be the biggest thing to remember, is just social media is intended for good. It does a lot of good, and it is just fun.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and yeah, I can see why that's important to remember, because a lot of people will have cynical perspectives on it and say, oh, it's just people sharing the best parts of their lives, and it makes people have unrealistic expectations for how their own lives were going, or oh, it's just an opportunity for trolls to come out and start belittling other people, or oh, it's going to bring out the worst in humanity and just be an open forum where anyone can share their deepest, darkest thoughts, or oh, it just leads to power grabs where people will use the most obvious things they can think of to get rich quick or make
Right.
some fame for themselves. But yeah, it definitely does have some positive benefits and underlying bright spots that people do miss sometimes. For the two people watching who also don't use social media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. What social media platforms do you use? I know you mentioned Instagram at one point.
Instagram. I had a Snapchat for a while, and I got it back recently because a lot of my Winter Guard people, we have like a Snapchat group chat. But I don't really use it as much. But my main one's Instagram, and then I have a Tumblr, and then I have a Pinterest, but I don't really use Pinterest as much anymore. And technically, I have a Facebook, but I pretty much deleted it. The account is still there, but I don't ever use it, so I don't really count that. So mostly just Instagram and Tumblr.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about Tumblr?
I like Tumblr. I've met quite a few friends from different countries that I still keep in touch with because of social media and because I was able to meet them through Tumblr. I try to stay out of the more political side of Tumblr because that's not what I want to use the platform for. And I know a lot of times the information on Tumblr can be biased because it's coming from second and third and fourth hand sources. So I try to stay with the more fun side where it's more like fandoms and sharing people's art and funny things that are happening in other people's lives, that even though they might be fake things, they're still funny to enjoy and think that maybe these wild crazy scenarios are happening in someone's life. So I really enjoy it, and I also like the fact that you can keep yourself mostly anonymous on it, so it's less biased by your base perception of someone, because you can kind of in a way show your true colors in a sense, because no one else really knows who you are, but that can also lead to people concealing who they are, but that's a risk you take with any social media, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you have to, and just be careful with how much you're putting out there, and not being an idiot. Like, oh, what do you guys think of my house at X address? Like that.
Right,
That's not smart. But yeah,
right. Yeah, like the friends who I've met, they're people who, before I shared really any deep personal information, like surface level things, like, yeah, they can know I'm in high school and they can know I live like in the state of Virginia, but don't really give them anything past that, or like don't like me and a friend who I've been following on Tumblr for 3 years and talking to for a year now, just sent each other a picture of what the other person looked like. So like, there's an obvious, we both took our time with getting to the point where we shared more personal information, because we know a lot of times those things can be manipulated. But I would have never met her had I not had social media. So that's a very big benefit of it, is that you can meet all these new people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. You just have to be careful.
yeah, and you just have to exercise the same caution that you would in normal life.
Right.
Yeah,
Don't reveal too much to strangers too quickly.
yeah.
It applies as much on the internet as it does in real life.
Do you think there should be an age limit for people using social media, and is there a proper way that you can enforce it?
I think the problem is it's very easy just to fill in a random box on you know social media, so I think it is harder to verify someone's age. But a lot of times at the end of the day, you're gonna have to accept that there's gonna be younger people on social media no matter what you do, because people are evolving more and more to bypass the rules. So I think that reasonably there should be an age limit, but realistically, it's probably never.
Where would you put that age limit?
I would put it around 10. I would say I think 10 is about a good age to start being more exposed to the internet, because you're just about to enter middle school, really, um, which is a bigger, more open field of someone's life than, say, elementary school, which tends to be a bit more sheltered. And you're really developing more of an interest in the world around you, because you're learning more about the world around you and the different kinds of people in the world around you. It's not just the people in your cul-de-sac anymore. So I think that would probably be a good age limit to start letting people use social media.
Yeah,
Just
definitely.
other things that are going on in your life.
Do you buy into any of the mindsets that people take that the next generation is going to be terrible or whatever?
I think the next generation is going to be as terrible as people lead them to believe they're going to be. Like I was saying earlier with the people at Manchester, a lot of it, I feel like they've just given up on trying to change people's opinions of them. Because if you believe I'm going to be this way already, and clearly me acting differently isn't changing that opinion, why should I act differently when it's easier just to fulfill the stereotype? So I think we have to be careful with how we treat the next generation, because if we lead them to believe we already think they're going to be a terrible generation, then they're not even going to try to be a good generation, because there's no point in trying to change our unchangeable perspective. So I think as long as we continue to feel positively about the next generation with a healthy amount of skepticism, as you should have with anything, that they're going to turn out just fine. They're going to be different than this generation, but we're different than a generation before us, and they're different from the generation before us. People evolve, and that's honestly healthy. People should evolve. We shouldn't stay stuck in a mindset. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to vote, and I wouldn't go to school with people of color, and
Yeah, absolutely.
things that I and the other people around me deserve to have. So I think, the generation's only going to be as bad as we want them to be or make them into.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, honestly, the way I look at it, I see it as just repeating the trend that every other generation does. Every generation thinks that the next generation is going to suck or is going to be super immature or isn't going to pull their weight, and that's because they're younger than the current generation. And if you're looking at someone who's younger than you, you're going to think that they're more immature, that they're not pulling their weight, that they're not going to deal with issues correctly, that they're not that they're going to ruin all of the hard work that you do. And it's embarrassing at some points because if you look at all of the stuff that the older generations say about millennials, it is no different than the stuff that we say about the next generation. And
Right.
it's just a bit silly. Like, I mean,
Uh-huh.
at some point, it's a social play and it's cliche, and it's like, oh, look, I'm cool. I'm saying the stuff that everyone else espouses. And then at some point, it's just kind of embarrassing. It's like, okay,
Right.
we all know this isn't true. Can someone just stand up and say it and get everyone else to agree with them?
And I think a lot of it too is that, um, yeah, we're very hypocritical in the fact that we say these things about the younger generation that are being said about us, and we don't really seem to be learning. And a lot of times we forget, especially with what the current generation is saying about millennials, is they forget that they raised the millennials. They gave them their basis, and while they're not necessarily responsible for everything they're claiming millennials do, you have to remember that the older generation said this about you, and you're saying about them, and they're going to say about the next generation. Like, this is just who we are as people. And just because my generation is different than my parents or our parents' generation doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's, in a way, almost survival of the fittest. You've got the best traits for the time and the place, and those are just going to be different based on the current social climate.
Oh yeah, and especially just based on how rapidly society is changing, like in the past 50 years, you have to look at it like that. Like,
Right.
like it'd just be silly to expect someone to be exactly the same as someone who grew up in an entirely different generation. Like, there's a reason we call it a generation because, like, it's almost like the population is evolving over time, and I mean it is obviously, in a lot of senses, but yeah, just even in terms of its mentality, it's way different to grow up in a system where you can just Google an answer if you want it, or you can find out how all your friends are doing immediately by texting them if you want
Mhm.
to live 10 years ago, or heck, now just scrolling through a feed on some social media. Like,
Right.
it, it's it's just a completely different thing, and like it's almost intimidating at this point how fast society is developing, and I almost feel bad for the people that are older because even growing up in it, like it's ridiculous how fast it's moving.
And if you think about it in like more of a concrete example, like for example, aviation travel, we invented the airplane, and then about 30 years later, we're in space. Like, you just need that one small spark to really get things going. And we've kind of hit that point where we've gotten, with the invention of the internet and the development of technology, we've hit that one point. And now, at an almost scary pace, like you said, we're going to develop as a society, but that has a lot of benefits. And I think sometimes we focus too much on the negative aspects of change and forget that we're living longer and healthier people, and we're more accepting people, and we have more respect for other people and their differences, especially culturally and physically, and that's good and that's positive, and we need to focus on the positive things that change can bring about, and not just the fact that it's not the society you grow up in. It doesn't mean that your society was bad, but this one can and should be better, because we should be learning as people. We shouldn't be regressing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not a good thing if your society's getting worse over time. And yeah, I mean, even though in my view, like how, oh, America's an empire on decline, or oh, humans are just marching towards their eventual doom, that doesn't mean that we can't make it better in what little that we can. I
Right.
mean, we need to do everything to make the most of our lives, otherwise we're just wasting our time. I mean,
Right.
so
And
like
yeah, eventually it's all going to go up in flames, but it doesn't mean that that should halt human progress.
yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, you can be defeatist, but I mean, that's not helping you in the present, is it?
Right.
So
It's
yeah,
not helping you, and it's not helping anyone around you.
yeah, definitely, and that's something that annoys me a lot about mainstream media is just how how efficiency minded it is. Like
Right.
I'm sure they've talked about this in psychology, and if not, I'm a little disappointed to be honest. How like the most powerful emotions for getting someone to act are making them feel fear, feel anger, and
Right.
specifically anger, and then
Yeah.
the one that's the weakest is making someone feel happy.
Right. Because happiness leads to contentment, and contentment leads to complacency.
Yeah, exactly, and that shows you why there's so many internet trolls because they get a response, Nobody,
Right.
you don't have someone doing that if they think that they're just wasting their time, and that's why the news is so focused on scaring you or fear mongering or
Right.
trying to
It's effective. It gets views. It gets clicks. People listen to it. It's more interesting to us.
Yeah, exactly. And like that just kind of devolves into my approach to learning, which has always just been I want to be someone that's an independent thinker. I don't even want to be a critical thinker. I want to be outside of what people are trying to say in like their accounts, and I want to just use what's in my head, and because my head is no different than anyone else's, and just
Right.
use the tools in there to make a decision because I can trust that that's going to be fairly unbiased from you. And if as long as I try and keep myself in check and am aware of my shortcomings, then I can actually make something here.
Right.
And like that's one of my biggest things is just having respect for other people's feelings, and respect for your own positions, and like it just beyond like questioning yourself, also recognizing, okay, but I'm also a person here. I'm not going to question myself to the point that I'm going to make myself depressed or feel like I'm worthless. I'm recognizing my benefits as well as my drawbacks and understanding myself completely as a human being.
And that's what I like a lot about, my English class this year when we do these Socratic seminars is we've all known each other for 4 years at this point. So we all kind of understand how the other people work. So we're able to express our own individual opinions, whether they be religious or social or political, to, obviously you can't go way off the deep end and start saying everyone else is wrong, but we're able to freely share our opinion without a real fear of being rejected by our peers, because there is that sense of respect that just because my opinion is different than your opinion doesn't mean either of our opinions are necessarily wrong. They're just different opinions, and they're both allowed to function in the same society. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, that I feel like I can express my more religious opinions to people who are more agnostic and atheist, because I'm not necessarily trying to convert them to my religion. I'm just expressing in my upbringing, this is my viewpoint, but I'm interested in hearing yours. And that's why I've always liked about having a group of friends that's religiously diverse. Like I have friends who are Jewish, I've had friends who are Hindu, friends who are agnostic or atheist. I have a friend who's actually Wicca. So we're able to talk about our different religious, viewpoints, and how that's changed us without feeling the need to hide or change that to fit other people, because it's just different and not bad, different and not necessarily wrong.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest things in college. But like even this year in class like AP US Government, where like I went, no, that applies too much credit to me. I'm not going to say I went out of my way to sit next to David Pointer. It just happened to be he was one of my friends in that class. But most people would be surprised by that, and they'd say, what are you doing, Ryan? He's conservative," or "Oh, Ryan, he has insensible views." But I mean, that's a silly way of looking at things. If you take the time to understand anyone's position, you're going to see the logic behind it. And once you get to that point, you can have an actual discussion with them. And like,
Right.
it's just ridiculous that like some people hold these views that like someone is incapable of understanding their side, or oh, this guy just doesn't know what he's talking about. That's ridiculous. Like if you haven't taken the time to even understand why the person thinks the way they are, you're in no position to say anything on their feelings, unless they're like a neo-Nazi or something, obviously. But that's clearly
Right.
not the case.
That's the deep end I was referring to.
Yeah.
There is a point where you're like, nope, that's just disrespectful.
Yeah, and like also like there's never a reason to be disrespectful to somebody. You like if they're disrespectful to you, you'll walk away, or like, and obviously if they're just like stalking you or something, that's a different story. But once again, it's within that equilibrium, not that equilibrium, within the bounds of normalcy. And like if somebody's off the deep end, you take extreme action. If somebody does something really great, you give them a hug or something like, or I don't know, maybe that's what normal people do. I don't give people hugs, but like
Yeah,
if
that's what normal people. That's what more tactile people do.
yeah, that's what people do who don't have like a pair of pants that like they feel like they get like a sympathesia or response. Not sympathesia. That's creepy. Like a like a response where it's like I feel like I just got shocked.
But yeah, no, I think that's the thing too. Or like, especially with you don't always have to stay in a situation where you feel disrespected. Like we were talking about with me earlier in show choir, I didn't feel like I was respected by Miss Thomas. So instead of, going off at her, trying to get administration involved, I just removed my from the equation because that was the healthiest and best way to deal with that kind of situation. I think a lot of people are so focused on proving their point and proving their right that they forget that they can just remove themselves from the situation and just leave rather than trying to stay and change someone that is obviously isn't going to change. But back to the more political sides of things, that's why if I, had to choose, I'd have political conversations with my dad's father rather than my mom's father, because I'm a Democrat in a family of Republicans, which luckily I've been allowed to, grow up and form my own opinions on those kind of things and still feel relatively respected. But my grandfather, my dad's side, when we have political discussion, I feel like he actually listens to me and hears my opinions and provides his opinions, not necessarily changing to mine, but just showing me how he sees things without wanting to change how I see things, and just providing a different viewpoint rather than my mother's father, who is more likely just to, insult me and just, oh, she's just that liberal millennial, where I don't feel as respected. So I try not to have the conversations, even though I'm being forced and drawn into them, because, it's a environment of respect. My dad's father respects me and my opinions, and my mom's father doesn't, because they're not his opinions.
Yeah, no, I definitely can understand that. And it's a huge thing when you're talking to someone, the end goal isn't to have convinced them that you're right. Like, that's a silly thing. The end goal is to have had a productive conversation with them. And whether that means that you conveyed some part of yourself, or you fostered some kind of bond, or you conveyed why you think a certain thing. The point is, it's not a game. Beyond a game, it's not a competition to be like, no, I'm the person with all the right ideas, or oh no, I must be right because my personality and my everything that I represent is who I am. Like, you
Right.
can't be someone who is defined by their positions. You have to be defined by who you are.
Right. The point of having a political discussion, or just a discussion with someone about something that is not a more neutral topic, is to learn something, not to change someone. Like, I feel like I've learned a lot with having these discussions in English and having these discussions with my grandfather, and I've swayed my opinion a little bit one way or another in some cases, but I still, for 90% of it stayed, or more like 97% of it stayed with my own opinions. However, I've learned more about the way the other side thinks, so I can apply a different logic when I hear more outspoken opinions of theirs, because I can understand where they came from, what the basis of them is.
Yeah, definitely. Just out of curiosity, which opinions did you feel like were swayed the most in terms of just out of those conversations?
More of the way, like, in a not necessarily social political sense, but more monetary politics, with more conservative views towards money and how we spend it, than I had before, just because I learned different things about how our economy works that I didn't know before, not out of willful ignorance, but I just didn't know those things. So it was interesting to learn those things. I can't remember what they are specifically, but that just being the general thing is, I just know more now, so I'm able to have a more informed opinion. Like earlier when we were talking about Elon Musk, I was like, I just don't know enough about this to have a strong opinion. And I think a lot of people worry so much about getting stuck in that point where they have to admit they don't know things, that they try to just BS their way through.
Yeah, and like talk themselves into a corner. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had to, learn over the years that it's okay to just not know something and admit to that, because it makes you a better person. Because then you could just explain the situation to me, and I didn't have to try and fake intelligence on something I didn't know I was talking about.
Yeah, and luckily that's for me, like, it's never been something I've had to worry about, because I take pride in like not knowing things sometimes, which
Right.
isn't a great thing to have, but it's better than BSing yourselves into situations where like you're trying to be like, no, I'm the smartest person. I know everything, even though you obviously don't. That's a ridiculous premise.
I know at age 17 I don't know anything, and I don't expect at age 70 that I'll know everything. But the ability and the freedom to just admit, hey, I don't know this, can you educate me, has, I feel like, made me a better person because I'm willing to learn more that way rather than just trying to convince everyone I'm the smartest person, because I know I'm not. I'm a smart person, but I'm not the smartest, and I probably never will be, and that's okay. I don't need to be the smartest person.
Yeah.
I need to stay open to learning and open to growing and becoming more intelligent.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody's the smartest person ultimately. It's all just a matter of subjectivity. And what annoys me the most about like that whole thing about millennials think they know everything. Well, that comes from the fact that you think we know nothing because you don't respect the positions. And ultimately, and like this is something I always have to remind my parents, even though that sometimes that gets disregarded, is the fact that the number one conflict starter between a parent and their child, most often with teenagers, because when they're younger, they don't really get in conflicts with their parents
Right.
unless they just don't let
Or
them
the
have
conflicts are like, my parent won't have a 10th cookie and I'm upset,
Yeah, a tenth, yeah. But no, like the number one thing that always causes the problem is that someone feels like their position is not being respected, whether that be the parent feels like their child isn't respecting their position on, say, a curfew or whatever, or the child feels like they're not being listened to on why. I'm struggling to think of an example right now. Why they should be allowed to date at a younger age or whatever.
Right.
And like that, it's so important to have a working relationship with your parent where you feel like you can talk to them about these things and that you feel like you're being listened to. Because if you don't, then you're just going to say, why should I listen? Tell someone something that's not going to listen to me. I'm just wasting my time.
Right. And like, luckily I've had parents who are definitely more open to having that working relationship where, like, even though they're both more conservative in views, they've let me be more liberal in views because, they want, like my mom has said, especially with LGBT plus things, I'm, a bisexual person. And luckily, even though I live in a religious household, I live in a religious household that allows me to freely express that and, have girlfriends as well as boyfriends and things like that. But she said she's learned a lot from me through hearing about LGBT people from me that she wouldn't have necessarily tried to learn about before because it didn't really apply to her. So I was lucky that I was able to, educate her on those things, because she said, they're not necessarily things I disagree with, but before they weren't necessarily things I agreed with because I didn't understand them. But now, because we have that really good working relationship, she's been able to learn a lot and kind of, loosen her more strict views based on what she learned as a kid, because she knows more now. And I think that's really important, that not only has she taught me a lot, but I've been able to teach her things as well.
Yeah, and like at a certain point with those things, it's so important to be willing to forego your own feelings on a certain matter and just realize the state that the situation is in. Like for you, I'm sure if your parents said, no, you can't be bisexual, whatever that means, that you can't do that, like that wouldn't have had any effect on you. So your parent
Right.
recognized that and she said, okay, I could be obstinate here and be close-minded in some sense and not allow this to happen, or I could accept the fact that this is the way the situation will progress no matter what, and I can make the best of it for me and for you.
Right.
Yeah, so like that's just so important. I think that is a good mindset to have where like you think of it as a working relationship where like I also think that prepares people well for the workplace where they're not prepared to be working with a boss who may have different political views or
Right.
and like you can't yell at them and say no you're being mean to me or oh, why am I punished, like you can't do that. It's a
Hmm.
professional atmosphere and
Right.
any extra experience that someone can have with that before they get into working is so important.
Hmm. Especially, with, those more, social things like, the LGBT rights and stuff. It's not to say that my parents never struggled with these things and had moments where they were like, no, I just, I can't believe that, or I can't, bring myself around to that opinion. But the point was they stayed open to it and didn't just because they didn't understand something didn't mean that they didn't try to understand that. I think a lot of times people just shut down when they don't understand something because they feel like there's no point in learning it, and therefore they don't feel like there's any point in respecting it. I think, even if I don't agree with someone's political opinions, it's important to still respect their opinions because it's their opinion and they've formulated it based off things they've heard and different social and political and educational experiences that they've had that I might not have had that have shaped their opinions. And the same for me, different experiences I have shaped my opinions and made me think differently than other people. And a lot of people forget that that's the case, and they get so wrapped up in thinking everyone should have had the exact same experiences that they forget that that's just never going to be the case.
Yeah, and like for those people that like don't respect other people's opinions, just realizing that there's no reason to be stupid in a situation. Like even if you ultimately disagree and you're like, no, I just can't respect your position. Sure, you could yell at them, or you can just move on from the situation, as we've been saying, and just
Right.
say, okay, well, I'm gonna get myself out of the situation so I don't bring any harm to your day, and you don't bring any more harm to mine.
Right.
And like that's just such an important thing to just recognize that you can cut your losses sometimes, and you don't have to play this game where you're digging in and crap. I forget the fallacy. You have the sunken cost fallacy, where you feel like you have to win a situation even if you're in a crappy position, just because you're like, oh, I invested mental energy into this. I can't lose now. Oh, how silly would I look?
Right. It's okay to just move on from a discussion without having reached a resolution, because as long as you've learned something from that discussion, it's still been a productive, use of your time. Now, if you haven't learned something from that discussion, it is understandably irritating that you weren't able to reach a resolution. But it's like, my dad's always said with relationships I've been in, what have you learned from that relationship? If I've learned something, it hasn't been a waste of my time. It's been a productive relationship, even if it didn't end up in marriage, which clearly none of them have ended up in marriage, as I am
I would hope not.
17 and unmarried. But I've learned something from each relationship and from each friendship that I've had in my life, even if that friendship isn't still a part of my life. Different people teach you different things, and even though I've cut my losses in a way and moved on, it doesn't mean that those friendships or those relationships were a waste.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so important to always take a lesson from something. And beyond that, make sure either you're writing it down or you're talking it over with yourself, or you're just doing something to make sure that your brain isn't just going to catalog it away and never remember it again. Because,
Right.
like, some of the biggest things that I try and convey to people are how they have to remember that you and your brain, while they are the exact same thing, they're also two competing entities here.
Right.
You have you, the person that is trying to get a great career, that is trying to have maybe a good love life or whatever, and is like trying to finish a video game or something, or I don't know, whatever your goals are. So you have you,
Right.
the person trying to pursue your goals, and then you have your monkey brain, which is confused and doesn't realize the time that it's living in because it's been evolving over probably like a million years or so, and
Right.
it's just trying to adapt. It's not even trying to consider how it can best optimize itself for a certain situation. And you just have to remember that these instincts that you're feeling, which are mainly guiding your emotions, are coming from your monkey brain and not the you thing that is in your brain. And that the emotions, if not the enemy, they're not necessarily the best course of action, and you need to do
Yeah.
whatever you can to be objective in situations to avoid the repercussions of that.
Yeah, which goes back to what we were learning in freshman year in Ms. Klein's class with the different levels of the subconscious, with the id, the ego, and the super ego. That you have, the id, which is trying to fulfill all your more carnal and monkey-based desire. You have your super ego, which is your ideal self that, you're trying to achieve, the one that's most respected in society, that's, most effective, is the best member of society. And then you have the ego, which kind of, fills gaps between the two, making sure that the two can work together whilst not compromising one another entirely. Like, you can still fulfill those more monkey desires, or those more physical desires, while still remaining that as a, respected person and a respected member of society.
Yeah, that's actually really funny that you bring up the ego and the superego, because I was going to mention this in our discussion about AP psychology, but I actually despise Freud with all of my heart, and like he was the main reason I didn't take AP psychology.
Yeah, we did.
Not really, but you know.
Yes, we did a Freud unit. We recently finished it. However, Mr. Clark, the psych teacher,
Ooh.
was very open with his views of Freud and Freud's craziness. And I think, Freud did do a lot of positive things, and a broader sense that, his more specific personal philosophies were, flawed and at times deeply hypocritical.
Like the Oedipus complex.
Yes.
Yeah, that one was pretty bad. I don't know if it was just because he was German or what, but like he had a weird thing with sex.
Yeah, he definitely had a weird thing with sex. Yeah, and especially as someone, who struggles with mental health issues, when he talks about how, people who are mentally disturbed have obviously been sexually abused as a child, or things like that are the only things that can lead to mental illness. I'm like, wow, I must be repressing a lot of stuff here that I really don't remember if I've turned out like this. So, it's more in a, ironic, laughable sense that generally Freud did do a lot of good, but specifically he was completely insane.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say.
and like to a lot of extents, all of these geniuses are insane too in a lot of senses. Like if you look at someone like Tesla, he was clearly insane. You look at,
I mean, he literally built a death ray.
yes,
I adore Tesla. Tesla's one of my favorite scientists because I find kind of hilarious and also, clearly brilliant. But yeah, no, he was also insane.
Yeah, and like
he was in love with a pigeon, which I find amazing. I think that's the funniest thing, that he was in love with a pigeon.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And like to be able to think outside of the box to the extent that these people are able to, it can be hard to get back in the box sometimes.
Right.
And the thing with the ego and the superego, it's just it is hard to understand the subconscious, and like it's a weird thing. Like even I, like the person that's obsessed with trying to understand how the brain works, and like understand like how to control how it affects you. The only thing I've been able to come up with is that like it's some kind of construct to make the monkey brain feel better about itself and feel like it has like it's almost like an anti-suicide thing. But like that's my best guess. Like it's weird.
Well, if you just think about it, like in a very broad sense, science is just a bunch of cells trying to understand how they work. It's all just everyone's trying to figure out the world around them, and that moves at a different pace. And it's going to mean we're going to have to believe certain concepts that are probably not true because they're easier to reconcile in our brain. And it's called cognitive dissonance, when you have two conflicting opinions and your monkey brain has to rationalize those opinions. But obviously we've been able to do a lot of good through trying to figure out how we work, because it's brought a lot of good positive change and development in our society. So even though it's difficult to rationalize at times, you have to remember big picture terms that it's done good.
Yeah. And I read a Wikipedia article on that once, so I can vouch for the use of thinking about cognitive dissonance. And yeah, it's so important to be able to understand the fallacies and understand the methods by which people will try and manipulate you, and like the ways in which your brain will make mistakes just because it is designed to be efficient. It's not designed to be perfect.
Right.
And yeah, it's so important to be aware more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily aware, even just being cognizant. Like you can miss a couple things and people will point them out to you, but if you're not willing to listen to them, or you don't have the capacity to understand what they're saying, that's a problem, and that you need to address that, because
right.
Like we all have a certain ability, and obviously we're all born with different levels and different things, but we all have a certain potential that we can reach, and it always surprises me to see how much we can do. Like if you just look at some those mothers that can like lift cars off of their babies. Like just
Right.
the incredible things that the human body can do, and that's not just physically. The brain can do incredible things as well. And I'm not going to break out some argument about how we use 10% of our brain because obviously that's not true. But
Right. That's an old-fashioned thinking that's no longer that's been disproven. But it's kind of like that thing with vaccines and autism that people just have been hearing it for so long that at some point you just start assuming it's true, and clearly it's not, even though newer, more effective science has proven otherwise. People are stuck in their ways, which goes back to the whole point that you know people always blame the younger generation because they're stuck in their ways, and sometimes we're just not ready or willing to progress as a society, and that's when we can get into trouble.
yeah, definitely. And it's so important to just be willing to talk to people because, like, it's through conversations that you actually get the context, you get to hear why the person thinks the way they do, and to,
Right.
like, where you actually begin to understand someone, even above social media or texting or whatnot. And, like, that was something that really led me to start the podcast, honestly. Like, I was getting fed up with texting and just feeling like I was either not getting the context or I wasn't getting the response times that I deserved on my texts or
Right.
whatnot. And like it's been really helpful because like originally I started off with phone calls and I said, wait, hang on a second, shouldn't I just record these? So I did that a couple times and then I realized, hang on a second, this is wiretapping. I should probably tell people that I'm recording them. And then,
Right.
hey,
But see, if you make it into a podcast, it's socially acceptable because you have it's public knowledge that you're doing this now.
yes, at least public knowledge to the 20 or so people who are aware of it. But I'm sure I could slap like an advertisement up in the hallway or something, and suddenly
Someone
up.
will watch it.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe.
I mean, my whole friend group, we have like a group chat. It's like 10 of us. When we first heard about the podcast, we were all very excited by it because, we've all enjoyed your company over the years, and we enjoy hearing opinions on things, and we all consider you a friend of ours, so we were excited to listen to this podcast because we thought it was interesting. And now that we finally found your YouTube, we can actually enjoy it, and we get to be on it now, so we're all like, obviously people are interested in the things you have to say and the things that their classmates have to say.
Yeah, and sorry about that again. Like honestly, I'm trying to get it up on iTunes. I've been terribly unproductive with that because
Oh,
even though even though I'm very technologically minded, I'm also very bad at resolving technological difficulties. And
right.
my approach to problems most often is just to ignore them and hope they go away.
Right,
And
it's like those
obviously,
updates on your computer that have been there for 5 years.
I'm okay with. I used to be really bad about not shutting down my computer, but now it just updates automatically whenever it shuts down. So that one's okay. But
Right.
resolving why my Bluehost will or Bluecast or whatever it is or WordPress will not accept the podcast URLs that I'm putting up for the RSS feed, and why that's not going to iTunes. That's on the back burner a little bit, but I just put it up on YouTube. And I never realized how long those render times were. Like people always talk about it, but yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, you're talking to a person who understood that you just said some words, but doesn't really understand what many of those words meant. So, but I'm going to trust you that, technology, while useful, is often difficult and annoying and cumbersome at times.
Yeah, and it's weird that I'm so interested in coding because of that, because so much of coding is just debugging, and like that's always my least favorite. I mean, that's everyone's least favorite part, but that's the part where the straw breaks the camel's back every time. But being able to just understand how it works is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Let's see. Here, let me go into dive into my outline. I actually haven't touched it this
Sure.
entire time. Here, let's see what we got here. Here, I'll just. Do you watch any sports at all? Slash follow. Slash have any opinion on them?
I know a loose general amount about basketball, mostly because my brother does a lot of basketball. So, I go to a lot of his games, and I'm frequently find myself watching basketball out of sheer point of the fact that it's on the TV right now because he's downstairs. But I'm not really a big sports person. It's just never been my thing. So unfortunately, I have no opinion on sports.
Okay,
So, sports fans are crazy.
Yeah, I can agree with that, especially after reading some articles on like European ultras, which are just really passionate sports fans that like kill people because they're
Right.
on like rival teams. And yeah, like it's absurd. But I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend the NBA podcast I've done with Rod then, but yeah, like sports are a really interesting thing. And I'm one of those weird sports watchers where I don't watch sports. I like to talk about them because I'm fascinated by the systems that they are. But
Right.
yeah, like eh, that's weird when like people latch on to like a specific sports player because like they're inspired by them or they like see
Uh-huh.
themselves in them. And like role models are weird in general, but the thing that annoys me about a lot of people are like those that say like, "Oh, I'm proud to like not like sports," or "Oh, those sports fans are real idiots, aren't they?" Because like they're watching someone play a sports game but not playing it themselves. But like we all have our thing, and like
Right.
we all do something that we're embarrassed by, or that doesn't make a lot of sense
Yeah,
logically, and
we
like
all have our guilty pleasures.
yeah, absolutely. And like it it, it is weird that it's a guilty thing, but society likes to bring us all down, and I don't even know if I think that, to be honest, but that sounds nice. And yeah, like it just seems too easy to bring people down like that.
Right. Because I'm like, yeah, I kind of think sports fans are a little weird, but I mean, they're not, for the general part, they're not really hurting anybody. So there's no point in ridiculing them because, I read a lot of books, so I'm obviously very, into many different fictional worlds. And other people find that weird, but I'm not really hurting anybody by it. So, like, there's no point in judging other people for doing weird things as long as they're not hurting people.
Yeah, good for you, Yuri. Points to anyone who got that reference. But yeah. So you've actually been able to keep up with books. Like that's something that I've really regretted about my life in like the past 4 years. Is just since like I got a phone, I haven't been able to read at all.
Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of a book that I'm rereading right now called The Soul of an Octopus. So it's written by no, no,
So,
no, no,
sorry,
yeah,
I'm literally wearing a shirt right now that has an octopus on it. So I can say very strongly that the octopus is my spirit animal. So
yeah, no. On my phone, all my friends get contact emojis, and yours is three octopi. So you
octopodes,
know,
please. But
octopi not technically the most correct form. It's whatever. It's just it's okay. We're
yeah,
just gonna have to accept that I use octopi. I think it's funny, but yeah. So it's this really interesting book written by a naturalist named Cy Montgomery, who's exploring the more emotional and physical sides of the octopus world because they show a very wide degree of um, emotions, really, in terms of like how they can change the color of their skin to represent different feelings as well as camouflage, and how they've been shown to have their own personalities and that they can uh, solve different puzzles and think in a way that we wouldn't normally associate with invertebrates. So I find them very interesting just because, like, again, with snakes, there's something so different from us on just a physical and more biological standpoint, yet we share a lot more with octopi and the way they think and perceive the world than I think we would like to admit in our, human pride.
yeah, and like pride is such a weird thing, and yeah, like oh, I'm on Team Human or whatever. Like if they if they're that good, frankly, like yeah, I wish more people were just saying they were on Team Human instead of these other teams. But yeah, like the octopus is such a fascinating creature just for all its superpowers and how advanced it is compared to people's perceptions. Like everyone loves to think that like mammals are the greatest thing ever, but we came from the sea, and
Right.
the sea has evolved along with us, and the octopus, the dolphin. That's pretty much it, actually. But those two animals, they've gotten pretty powerful, and if not for the fact that they didn't have legs and they can't, well, they kind of can use tools, but not to the extent that we can. I
They
think,
don't have opposable thumbs, right?
yeah, yeah, like that's probably the only difference, and the fact that we
Right.
can't communicate with them.
Right, and the thing is, we as humans see intelligence as being such a set thing in terms of more physical or social intelligence and how we interact with the world around us, but that's not necessarily, like we were talking about earlier with natural selection and the best traits for the time and place. That doesn't exactly make sense in an aquatic world. You don't need those things. You need different tools to survive, which octopuses have clearly evolved to have, and are clearly have those tools that they need to survive in their world. And that doesn't mean that they're stupid, it just means they're not human.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
not necessarily bad or negative, it's just different.
Yeah, and that goes into the othering thing, which I don't need to talk to you about. I think we all recognize at this point that othering is wrong and stupid, and that Mr. Fact
Right.
is right.
Yes, I can concur on that.
Yeah, but
Other pointless.
so do you most often read fiction, or is it like the scientific fiction that you just mentioned, or like do you read other stuff?
Well, this isn't actually scientific fiction. It's based on real experiences that this woman has had.
Okay.
It's more memoir than it is a science book per se, because it's written by someone who isn't a marine biologist. So there's a lot more emotion involved in it, but it's still very good from a scientific standpoint. But it kind of just depends on the mood I'm in. Like, I've read as much fantasy as I've read poetry, as I've read nonfiction, as I've read psychology books. I had a really big phase with true crime for a while, and actually bought a few true crime novels because I found them interesting. So it's just more of its a desire to inundate my world with different kinds of media and ways of seeing the world, and learning about how other people think that it is a specific genre. Though there are certain authors I find, and certain novels I find myself going back to more than others. But I just like being able to fully immerse myself in someone else's world for a while. I think that's a really neat thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm gonna set you up with two questions because my urethra is about to explode or something. But sorry for that image, guys. But what what how do you manage to actually get yourself to be able to read when you have so many other more engrossing and like yeah, just frankly addicting sources to go to? And what do you think about Audible as a source of books?
I've personally never used Audible. I think it's great for people who do struggle in terms of like finding the time to read physical books. Part of it is just my exposure to books. Like, if you were in my room, you could see I have a ceiling to floor bookcase that's about 3/4 full with books. So part of it's just the fact that there are books everywhere in my house, which has scientifically proven to increase intelligence. Not necessarily that you read books, but that you have access to this knowledge. So, and part of it is I just force myself to make time for reading, because I know it's always really helped me just slow down from the world a bit, and I can just find myself engrossed in these books for hours. And then part of it too is I was born with a genetic mutation of sorts, where most people have one dominant eye that processes at microscopically faster than the other eye, but I am ambiocular, so I process with both eyes at the same time. So I process written information twice as fast as a normal person does. So a book that might take you 3 or 4 days to read, I can probably read it in a day or two. So that helps, as well as just the speed at which I can read and comprehend those things.
Really, that's absolutely fascinating, and
It's really useful. It makes test taking so much easier. So when I finish a test first in a class, it's not always that I know the material, it's just that I've read it faster than other people, but it's definitely been useful in my pursuit of reading.
oh crap! I just realized I muted the wrong mic. I muted the phone mic and not the one on my computer, so I think everyone just heard me going to the
I didn't
bathroom.
hear anything.
No, I know I muted the phone one, but I don't think I muted the one. Well, I have a policy of not editing the stuff that goes up on YouTube, so if you guys enjoyed the sounds of waterfalls and whatever other stuff just happened in the bathroom, I hope you enjoyed that. For those listening to this on iTunes, this is a good time to go check out the YouTube channel. We got some great bonus material on there for all the background that you could possibly want to going into making a podcast.
Getting the full experience, the
Yes.
full unbiased podcast experience, including the 20 different times we had to switch what we were working on because the audio kept going bad. The full human experience.
Here, hang on a second. Let me turn on the faucet so it sounds like I wash my hands. No, I'm just kidding. But only the YouTube people know. But yeah, that's absolutely fascinating that you can do that with your eyes, and that's definitely always really annoyed me that I'm not a fast reader. But
Yeah.
that I'm sure that came in handy so much on the standardized tests because that's so
Yes.
much about reading fast.
Yes, it's all about reading fast. So that's definitely been to my benefit. But it was funny when we first found out because, I went to the eye doctor like you do when you're younger just because, it's part of the normal eye checkup, and the eye doctor just kept looking into both eyes and going, So my mother's panicking. She's a mother. I'm the first child. The doctor is making all these noises that usually indicate something's wrong, and she's like, "What's going on? What's wrong?" It's like, "Oh no, nothing's wrong." And she was a little mad because he kind of freaked her out, but obviously it's worked out to my benefit, much to the chagrin of other people who do not read as fast.
Yeah. What is that called exactly? I want to read about that later.
Ambiocularity. It's like ambidextrous, but with ocular at the end.
Okay, I'll have to do some reading on that. And yeah, I can see that would be scary. The only thing worse than that could it be a doctor, and this reminded me of a SpongeBob episode where he goes in and the doctor's like, "Oh no, oh no, this is terrible."
Right.
Yeah, the last thing that you want is the doctor looking nervous.
To say something's wrong, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously it's not much better to be getting a cancer diagnosis from some placid-faced doctor, but I mean it's better.
Right.
It's better than from a panicked one.
Yes, luckily mine worked out in my advantage.
Oh, 100%. Would you rather have what you have there, or I'm not gonna say eidetic memory, but one where the one that people have where they can remember what they read?
I have a pretty decent and intact memory as is. I don't remember everything I read, but I feel like I absorb a good portion of it. And as been proven again and again when I take tests and whatnot, obviously I'm comprehending the things I'm reading, even though it's at a faster speed. So I'd rather have what I have now, just because I've been able to use it to my advantage for so long that I've become so accustomed to it that I don't know what my life would be without it.
Yeah.
It's just such a natural thing to me is to be able to read so fast that sometimes I forget other people can't, and I get frustrated with them. And I have to remember that this isn't normal. So I'd rather have what I have now than a memory where I remember everything I read. Because I think at some point it'd be overwhelming just for the sheer volume of things I've read in my lifetime.
Yeah, definitely. What was I gonna say? Crap, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so I've definitely gotten a lot of use out of Audible as well, just because that's really the only reading I've been able to do, and mostly I just listen to Star Wars books or stuff when I can actually find the time, because it's so hard today and this gets into what I was wanting to talk about, is how media today is moving into shorter and shorter length entertainment. Where when you would watch a movie or a documentary 10 or 20 years ago, now you'll watch a 15 or 20-minute video at worst on YouTube on the topic, or you'll see hopefully not sound bites. Those are a little too short, but
right.
You'll be getting much shorter media from that. Or if you wanted to say read a book or something, you're gonna listen to an audiobook instead, because that's an 8 or 10 hour investment versus a couple of days worth of investment. Or that's my problem with audiobooks. I can listen to a podcast or something and get a similar thing out of it in a half an hour or an hour versus the 8 hour commitment. That makes me really sad. The audiobooks that I can listen to for the most part are just ones that I had been wanting to read for 3 years or 5 years or something, and that's sad that it takes that much of a build up to actually get me to listen to what's an amazing product ultimately. But I mean, it's so difficult to make that initial investment.
Right. And I think for me, it kind of goes the other way, where my problem is I can rationalize watching 10, 15-minute YouTube clips but like watching 5 movies just verbally sounds a lot more time consuming and almost time wasting. So my problem is more of shorter media makes it easier to consume more of it, because you can be like, oh, this is a short video, I have time for another one,
No,
and then
don't worry. That's the
you
exact
wasted
same thing
20
for
hours.
me. It's the exact same case for me, and I think for most people is that like it justifies doing more. But
Right.
no, absolutely, and like for me, I'm kind of proud of the fact that like I've watched like 15 movies in my life or something. But yeah, like ultimately, I think at this point I've just decided that movies are like they just don't have the time required to tell a complete narrative, which is funny because their other problem is that they're too long. But
Right.
like that's what happens, and that's why a lot of movies I think now are going into making series. Beyond the fact that that's also more economically successful. But
Right.
just wrapping up that book's discussion, because I remembered what I lost my train of thought on. Like when you're reading, and like this is obviously reading for comprehension. I know that you comprehend everything that you're reading, but like you read a little slower when you're trying to really get invested in something
Right.
versus like on a standardized test. Do you get that sensation where like you're reading it and then like 10 minutes later you realize, wait, what the heck happened? Because like you just disappeared into the world and like you actually just start seeing the world, like not as in perceiving that you are, but almost like a dream state where like you aren't really aware of what's happening in front of you, but like you kind of like see it and like you remember seeing it, and like it's like a super weird thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've done that where like I've read something and then like I'm thinking I'm processing, and then I realize that, oh, I actually haven't read anything, or like I'll be doing something and then I'll realize like I don't remember quite how I ended up in this spot, but like I'm totally comfortable. It's not like a unsettling feeling per se, but it's just like, oh, suddenly I don't really remember reading this. So for sure, when I'm trying to focus too hard, sometimes I'll just kind of drift off, and then I'll try to focus again, and then I'm focusing and not actually on reading. So I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah, and like that's to be honest, like that's not really what I meant by it. That I just meant like that, like just getting so invested into a book that like you just lose the outside world, and like I feel like you're completely immersed in it, and it's almost like you're watching a movie, but that might be too out there to really understand, especially for without like an example or like a puppet show to demonstrate it.
Oh yeah, I've done that before, where I just get so invested in a book that I forget reality, in a sense, where like I'll like get invested in the story and almost in a way put myself in that story, and then I put the book down to like go eat dinner or something, and I have to remember you know the rules of the actual world I'm living in, not in this fictional world I was in 5 minutes ago. So for sure I've done that, where I just get overtly engrossed and I have to bring myself back down to earth.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, what do you think about dreams and dreaming?
Sorry, what did you say?
Sorry. What do you think about dreams and dreaming?
I think that dreams have a lot of importance, and I think that they definitely, in a more Freudian sense, do reveal a lot about our unconscious and the things we worry about that we don't think about. I actually have an uncle who works as a licensed hypnotherapist.
Oh, okay.
So he hypnotizes people, and in that state will use that consensually to help reveal different parts of themselves that they may not typically think about through this therapy, because he's able to access the unconscious in a way. So I've learned a lot from him about dreaming and the symbolism it has and what certain things can mean. So sometimes when I've had a really weird dream, it's like not exactly like inappropriate, but it's not something I want to talk to my parents about. I'll text him and be like, hey, what does this mean? I don't know what this means. This situation isn't real, but it felt real. So I definitely think dreams have a lot of importance, and I think just brushing them off can be dangerous sometimes, because you have to realize at some point you want these things, or you're thinking about these things, because clearly they keep coming up in your brain.
Yeah, I think that very last point encompasses what I think about that they keep coming back up in your brain, and like personally, I take the very empiricist view of dreams, and oh, it's just your brain hallucinating and the electrical charges bouncing around it, and like that's stimulating a bunch of random parts in your brain just because your brain can't absorb all the electrical charges because so much of it is turned off at night. So
Right.
like that whatever has been happening the most during the day, or like whatever stress hormones or whatever floating around in your brain at the time, that's the stuff that comes up in your dreams. So like I'm not like the kind of person that's like, oh, read into the tea leaves or whatever, or oh,
Yeah.
I saw a banana in my dreams and that means that I'm gonna fall off a bus or whatever.
Oh yeah, and he definitely doesn't. My uncle who
No,
does,
no, I didn't mean to
he
imply that
definitely
he
does.
does.
No, no, no. I know you didn't mean it like that. Trust me. But like that's definitely not what I've learned from him. That I don't think necessarily individual specific objects mean something totally different. But I think that we should pay attention to the things that our subconscious is asking for and providing us in this more vulnerable state where we're less in control of our own thoughts and we can't see ourselves away from what we perceive to be the bad thoughts as much as we could when we're conscious.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to see that not everyone believes hypnosis is real when it's very clearly a real thing.
Yes.
Like,
No, I find it funny because when I tell people that, usually they're like, "Oh, so we did like fake science." I'm like, "No, it's not traditional science per se, but there's definitely scientific backup there. Like it's very real. He can definitely do it.
yeah, like
It's not quite like in the movies where like you can hypnotize someone to do all these crazy
yeah,
things.
no. Well, I mean, you can do that too, actually,
You can
but
do that,
but
but
don't do
like
that.
there's other versions of it. It's not always like that, I should say.
Yeah, and like I've been to one of those shows actually where like they get people to do those crazy things and like it. I've talked to those people and they're like, oh yeah, like yeah, on some level you're aware of what you're doing, and like hypnosis is just like suggesting it and making it sound like a better idea to your brain.
Right.
But I think it's a fascinating thing that some people just can't be hypnotized and some people can.
Because part of it is you have to be mentally open to giving up that control, and I think a lot of people who are hypnotist deniers, aren't open to giving up that control. But at least if you're curious about that, your brain is available to the possibility of something that you don't understand, which is something as people I don't think we do enough with being open to the fact that we don't understand everything, and that's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But in our human pride, as we've talked a lot about here, we aren't willing to admit that, and so we become we become unable to access that unbelievable thing.
Yeah, definitely, and like I think it has a lot of parallels to lucid dreaming. Like not a lot of people believe that exists either. Like, do what do you think about lucid dreaming? And have you ever had a lucid dream?
I did have like one lucid dream once where I was on vacation with my family in the dream. I was on vacation with my family and we went to one of those things where you can like pet the dolphins because like that's always been a dream of mine when I was little because I love marine biology and I love dolphins and I've always wanted to be able to interact with one up close. And then in the dream, I recognized that it was a dream and that I would wake up from this dream. So in the dream, I became distressed and started crying because I knew that at some point I would have to wake up and leave the reality I was in. But I didn't want to because, it was an ideal reality for me where I was there in this moment fulfilling this childhood dream. So I wasn't able to explain this to the other people in my dream because I knew they didn't know it was a dream and therefore wouldn't understand why I was so upset. But like, I have a harder time conceptualizing. I won't say don't believe in it, but I have a harder time conceptualizing people who talk about like having those out of body experiences where they're like floating around above their body. So my lucid dream wasn't technically in that more normalized definition of lucid dreaming, but I'm definitely open to the possibility that your subconscious could do that.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot that what you just said has a lot more parallels to sleep paralysis than anything. But
Right.
yeah, which is obviously a very scary thing, and like
Very
that
real thing, yes.
and like that turns a lot of people off to lucid dreaming. The fact that that can be the end result, but it seems worth it overall, just for the fact that the other option is you're just wasting this third of your day that you're spending sleeping.
Right.
Yeah, and like my problem with it was like I always discussed it with Alfie that like someday we were gonna try and like get ourselves to do it together, but like I don't know, I guess she just liked to sleep too much or something to do like the initial thing where like the steps like you do to get yourself to really get good at lucid dreaming is like the initial step is one of the hardest ones where you have to essentially just wake yourself up like every hour or like every 2 hours, just like in line with your REM cycle, and then just write down anything you can remember about what you were just dreaming.
Right.
And then so like you got to do that just every night for like a while, and then like until you can start recognizing the patterns that your brain is going to work in to create these dreams, because they're all coming out of your brain, and just
Right.
recognize like the fallacies that not the fallacies, the logical inconsistencies that it has. Like for a lot of people, it's, oh, if you walk up to a mirror and like push on it or whatever. No, like if you walk up to a mirror and look in it, it's not going to be a reflection. It's going to be like something distorted and random.
Right.
Or if you try and read something, it's not going to be words. It's just going to be a bunch of scribbles. So like recognizing those patterns is like the biggest thing. And like for a while, like I got really into it, and like I kept trying to do it. But my problem was I'd be fine with recognizing it was a dream, and it'd be the funniest thing because like I'd be within the dream, and I would like be cognizant of it and be like, oh, this is a dream, but my brain wouldn't care.
Right, your brain would just keep. Yeah, that was the thing in my situations. Like, obviously, I'd recognized a dream and I became emotionally distressed by it, but I wasn't able to change the scenario to make something that was less emotionally distressing. Like, I was still stuck in that scenario.
No, but that was the worst thing for me because my brain didn't even think to change something. It was just like, oh, I'm in a dream. Oh, okay. Okay. And then it just moves on.
Right.
Like, it's so hard to get yourself to care about things when you're out of control. And that's my problem a lot of the times, is that, like, I don't give enough credit to willpower because, like, I recognize the fact that you can get yourself to do a lot of things when you're out of control of the situation just through willpower, but unfortunately, I don't use that enough, and I don't buy into it enough to get myself to use it
Effectively.
Yeah, and then like that's a big shame because like that creates a lot of problems for me. Like I don't want to be sleeping much at all, but unfortunately, I don't give myself enough power when I'm sleepy to do stuff. Like I say during the day, like, oh, I don't feel like I have very much control in that situation. Therefore, when I'm in that situation, I'm gonna feel like I don't have a lot of control, and
Right.
like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and like those are obviously difficult to fix. But yeah,
another psych concept is the self-fulfilling prophecy, that if you believe something is going to turn out a certain way, that eventually it will turn out that way because you will subconsciously and consciously force it into that scenario, which is kind of what I was saying earlier with the whole issue of the younger generation being worse than this generation. Is, like I was saying, if we expect them to be worse, they're probably going to be worse because we have almost forced them to be worse by our own expectations, and our own expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's bias, it's bad perspective, it's the observer effect in physics. It just keeps coming up, the fact that we control how we perceive the world around us, and we need to be accountable to that. And like everybody struggles with that. It's a very difficult thing to be objective, and like that's one of the big examples of how you can control your life in more ways than you think, just based on how you perceive things.
Right.
Yeah, and that's it's just such a difficult thing. Okay, so I think that about wraps that up. Let's see. How can we what could we talk about for like 20 minutes to make this interesting? Okay, I guess I can dive into the outline. So something I've never asked you actually is so how would you rank the 6 taste flavors? This is like one of my good get to know you questions.
The 6 taste flavors.
Yeah, so those being sweet, sour, savory, bitter, spicy, which technically isn't a flavor, but
right.
I'm gonna include it. And then, am I forgetting one? Salty.
Okay, so for me personally, salty is my favorite. I'm a big person of salt. Like, I have, as we are talking, as I am sitting in my room, there is a bag of pretzels sitting next to me.
Strong choice.
Which is my favorite snack food. So salty is my favorite, and then probably sweet would come after it, because I like the contrast of sweet and salty things. Sour would probably become after that because I do like sour things. Like, you know those sour warhead candies that everyone always hated when you were younger because they were so bitter? Like, I could eat several of those at one time and it would hurt. It would be sour, but I would still enjoy it. So I don't know why, but I like sour things. So salty, sweet, sour, umami, so the fat taste, just because
Well, actually,
that's
that's not the fat taste. That's the meat taste.
that's the meat taste. I like meat. I'm a red meat person. I like steak and bacon. Well, I guess bacon's not as much as the red meat, but all those kind of things. Um, which ones am I missing here?
I think you missed sweet actually, which is very interesting.
What did I miss?
Sweet.
No, sweet's number 2.
Oh, oops. Jeez.
Uh,
Let's
salty, sweet, sour, umami.
bitter. Yeah, we got that. Did we get
Bitter.
spicy?
What?
Did we get spicy?
Spicy, no. I'd probably have to put bitter and then spicy because I'm a true white person. I have a very low tolerance for spicy food. So I'd probably have to put that last just because I'm very bad at handling the flavor of spicy food. And then bitter would have to be second to last just because out of, pure fact that it's the only one left.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, and I finally took the liberty of writing this down after like the fifth person that I've asked this, because I always fumble through trying to remember what mine is. So it's probably, despite the fact that I am in fact white, spicy, which is interesting because I actually just bought like a ghost pepper flakes. So
Oh, God, never do that.
no, I'm super excited to try them because I need to upgrade from habanero, and like that's the next level up. But I'll be careful for you.
I like bell peppers. Bell peppers are great.
I think that's like a 10 on the Scoville scale. If you so like just to compare that to habanero, that habanero is like 100,000. So
I'm good at my 10. I know my limits and I stick to them.
smart. But yeah, for me, following that would probably be salty. I used to be really, and yeah, I'll go into this backstory. I used to be super into salty foods, and honestly, I used to have a massive snacking problem. And when I say massive, I mean like 4 packs of Ritz crackers a day snacking problem. But
That is a very large snacking problem. You're not wrong.
yes, and like yeah, I finally fixed that problem last year when I went off to a pre-college thing, and I couldn't snack obviously because we didn't have
Right.
snacks. And with me, the biggest thing for instituting any change is getting myself to set a streak with something and saying, "Oh, I got a streak. I got to keep the streak." And like that's such an important thing for me. So when I got home after like 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm like, "Oh, I haven't snacked in 3 or 4 weeks. Let's see how long we can push this thing." And I haven't snacked in what has it been like 9 months now?
That's pretty good.
It is good, and it's finally fixed my salt intake, which makes me feel a lot better about my health. But yeah,
I just drink a lot of water to compensate.
there wasn't an amount of water that could save me from that. I think I get waterlogged or something, but yeah, it would just start coming out of my pores or something. But yeah.
Sorry, and just the visual imagery of that happening. Like you're just in the middle of your school day, just minding your own business.
Oh, I'm leaking.
Water just starts coming out of your pores. No one knows what to do.
Ah, jeez, does anyone have a Band-Aid? It's getting on the test. Ah, God.
The book is all wet now. We're gonna have to throw this textbook out now. We can't save it.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know how to deal with that because I barely sweat in the first place. But yeah.
Okay, so you had
Spicy, then salty. Yeah.
salty.
After that, probably savory. I'm not like a crazy red meat person, but honestly, it's just a factor of I'm not really crazy about any of these other flavors, to be honest.
Right.
Just because spicy is such an overpowering flavor that like you can just put it on anything and you're not gonna taste any of the other stuff.
Right. I want to taste the other flavors.
No,
I don't just taste the spice.
No, I just want to feel the burn. Yeah, and spicy is a weird thing though. Like it feels so good for it to hurt, which it's within this context, it makes sense. But
Right.
yeah, so after that, it'd probably be bitter. Like I honestly, I just don't have a problem with bitter for the most part. It's kind of weird. Like
Uh-huh.
most people say like, oh, broccoli tastes bad. I think it tastes fine, if not good. And like a lot of commonly bitter foods, I don't have a problem with. Like if it's crazy bitter, obviously, I got an issue with it. I don't want your stinking Brussels sprouts or whatever, or like.
Okay, if Brussels sprouts are done right, they are not bitter. If you have roasted, salted butter
Oh,
sprouts,
okay.
Brussels sprouts, those are good.
Okay, if you pile on a bunch of other flavors, it's not gonna taste bitter. Okay, I could just put the spicy.
Okay.
I could just put the ghost pepper flakes on the Brussels sprouts, and it can be like the Brussels bomb or whatever. But yeah, like it just defeats the purpose.
But yeah, fun story about bitter foods. I used to eat whole lemon wedges when I was younger. Like from people's water glasses, I would go around during dinner time and just take people's wedges and eat them.
Did you eat?
Nope.
Did you
I
eat
didn't eat the rind.
Okay, you didn't eat the rind. I was gonna ask.
Just the fruit part. But like, I would just eat them, and I can't do it now. Like, my tastes have changed. I guess I can't do it anymore. But I used to when I was little. But I digress. Back to your list.
Yeah. So after that would be sour, because unlike you, I did not have a lemon wedge phase. Like I'm not a fan of sour at all. I don't like the sensation of feeling sour. It's like uncomfortable for me. And like I think it was just a problem of I didn't eat a lot of sour foods or like sour candy as a kid. Like I've never been a candy person really. I've always just been a salt person. But yeah, and then
This is the thing. It's my thing where it's like it feels so good to hurt so bad.
Yeah,
that's my spicy is bitter like bitter and sour candy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then sweet being last, just because I really am not a candy person for some reason. Which is weird because I kind of was as a kid, but I guess just something snapped, and I'm like, no, I'm just not at all. And like stuff like cake will taste bad, or like it just.
That's a sad life. I'm so sorry.
No, it's a fine life. It's a healthy life. It's a more salty life.
Yeah, see, I used to have like huge sweet tooth when I was little, and I blame my mother for this because she ate. I know this isn't like a logical conclusion, but she ate a lot of Lucky Charms when she was pregnant with me. So I continually, jokingly blame her.
That's a logical conclusion
for my sugar addiction. But like as I've grown older, it's definitely changed. For like, especially with chocolate, where I prefer dark chocolate much more than I used to prefer it. Like I used to find it, unpalatable, and now I would take that over milk chocolate any day. So like, I definitely can't cram as much candy in my body as I used to be able when I was 10, but I definitely still like sweet things, and I do a lot of baking with desserts. I'm decent enough at it. But yeah, I've definitely changed. Flavor has changed over the years for me.
Yeah, baking is always fun. Like I don't cook as much as I really should or would. Well, no, I don't really like to, but it is a fun thing when you eventually do it. And like I make a mean brown rice for lunch, but yeah, don't eat my brown rice. I put the spicy sauce on it, but
you'd have to wheel me out of the school on like a stretcher. I would have just succumbed completely to the spice and would have died in the process. Let's be real. I'm weak.
Here lies Hope Grubbs. She tried some brown rice.
She tried some brown rice, and she was too white for it.
Yeah, she tried the brown rice challenge or whatever. I don't know. Okay, so I think that was a decent question. What do you like to have for lunch?
So long story into going into this. So I was like at the beginning of the year and like in the summer, I realized I had a weight problem where I wasn't necessarily overweight, but if I gained any more weight, I would have been overweight. So I had to start trying to lose weight. So
is that just BMI or?
Yeah, I think it was just BMI. It was just physical weight I was carrying. So I started like tracking my calories and whatnot, and I found out very quickly how calorie filled a lot of the things I was eating for lunch are. So now, I've lost like close to 20 pounds in the process.
Damn, good job.
And I'm at a weight now. So since August, I've lost like 20 pounds and gone down like 2 jean sizes, which is very gratifying in women's clothing. But so for now, for lunch, what I basically just eat now is like a little bit of grapes, a little bit of goldfish for the salty, and then I have turkey wrap. So it's just, a tortilla, some sliced turkey, a little bit of cheese, little bit of mayonnaise, and lettuce. So I basically just eat that for lunch every day, and I haven't gotten tired of it yet. So, it's got a good balance of flavors,
Well,
and it's pretty low calorie too.
yeah, well, that's fantastic, and I was actually thinking about talking about this because that's one of the biggest things that I've changed since Thanksgiving was,
Right.
for some reason I decided to start food tracking right before Thanksgiving, which
Uh-huh.
was not a good idea. I shouldn't have started it
Mistake.
right before
Mistake
Thanksgiving,
number
but
one.
I should have started it right after Thanksgiving. But yeah, no, so like now I have like a food scale that I bring everywhere, and I'll just weigh like the foods that I'm putting into my body because
Uh-huh.
if I'm gonna start doing food tracking, I gotta go all in. I gotta track to the 0.1 grams, but which is not fun for my parents. They don't like me making food anymore because it takes like 20 minutes because I gotta weigh every individual thing. But yeah, like it's such an eye-opening thing to like see what kind of stuff you're putting in your body and like saying, oh, okay, so before I was getting like oh, on this day I got like 300% of my salt intake that I should be getting, and wow, that was like a fourth of what I used to be getting. So geez, I don't know what I was doing to my body before, but like at
Right.
least now you have some understanding of like what you're eating, and you could
Right.
say, okay, is this the diet that I want? No.
Hmm.
Okay, well then I can see what I need to change here like very easily. And
Yeah.
like for me, like I've modeled my diet after like about like a 2300 calorie diet just because of my lifestyle and also just how I'm eating it. Like I very much try and make sure that I'm eating the most of my calories around lunchtime because from studies that I've seen, that's when you're burning the most calories. And then the problem for a lot of people is they either eat too much for breakfast or they eat dinner too late when their body's metabolism is starting to turn off, and then the food is just sitting in them in their body, and then their body turns that into fat because it doesn't have anything else to do with it when they're sleeping.
Yeah, I definitely found that too, where like I get nausea in the morning if I eat too early. So I know I need to eat something to get my metabolism starting. So I just eat like a small cup of yogurt in the morning. I'd have like a medium sized lunch. And then before I went to color guard practice at night, which is usually 6 to 9, I would eat a pretty decent sized dinner before I went to guard because I knew I'd be burning my most calories at that point. And then by the time I came home, I was hungry enough to have a little bit of a snack so I wasn't starving myself right before I went to sleep,
Yeah,
that I was still, controlling what I was eating. And now that I've lost all this weight, I've gone off calorie tracking, but I still keep, a loose regulation on, okay, so I had ice cream today, so I really don't need this second brownie or really the first brownie, to be honest.
yeah.
So it's definitely given me, like, I also don't get hungry as often anymore.
Oh, that's
Um,
good.
and I'm able to control the hunger a little bit more too, where like, especially when I'm eating food, taking a minute in between serving one and serving two to drink some milk, conversate a little, to see, am I really still hungry, or was I just eating so fast that my body couldn't keep up? So that's
That's
definitely
an
how
that's a
too. Is
fantastic point because
yeah,
that's a big problem where like you start eating faster than your body's actually realizing it's eating, and then like the signals to slow down eating hasn't actually reached your brain yet.
right,
And yeah, like that's a huge thing that like you stop in between portions, or heck, even like halfway through the meal, you stop so your body can catch up. And like
right,
I've never really bought into the whole thing about like, oh, make sure you avoid indigestion or something because I'm a kid, I don't get indigestion.
right,
But yeah, like it's important to be reasonable in like the speed that you're eating your meals. And like
huh,
for me, I do the same thing for breakfast. I just eat a banana and then I go off to school, and then really what I would like to be doing for lunch is to be eating like 600 calories at like 10 o'clock and then 600 calories at 2 o'clock, but feasibly because of how the school schedule works, I can't do that. So
right,
I just have like 1,000 around like 11:30, which isn't ideal, but hopefully I can make it better in college. Probably not
right,
based on the schedule again, but at least I know what I should be doing.
uh
And
huh,
but yeah, like it's just so important to be aware of this stuff and be willing to collect the data. And really, the only thing that's kept me doing the food tracking was just because I love tracking data and not even analyzing data, just being like, "Ooh, I'm collecting data. Ooh, that's exciting," and like,
right.
and that
And for me, a lot of it too is making it easy for myself is like I used an app where I could set reminders at certain times of the day where I knew I would typically be eating those meals to remind me to track those meals. And then the app I was using is called My Plate, and what it allows you to do for a lot of things is you can scan the barcode
Oh,
on
that's
that
useful.
item, and in its database it will find the item and all its nutritional information, so you don't have to worry as much about are you getting the quantity right. And I also learned some basic tricks, like 3 ounces is like a deck of cards, or like, when comparing snacks and stuff, a cup of grapes is around 70 calories. So I was like, okay, I can eat, this small piece of chocolate that's 100 calories, or I could have a cup of grapes instead, which is a lot better for my body in the long run. So comparing it to things I could more easily quantify in my brain, because like sometimes grams and ounces and milligrams and whatnot are kind of harder concepts for our American measurement system brains to really process. It made it easier for me to realize, oh, I really don't need this, or oh, that's a lot more calories than I thought it was, or oh, just because I think it's healthy doesn't mean it's healthy. So that's what helped me a lot too, is just being able to easily quantify all of this more vague sounding and nuanced information, which is what companies do on purpose
Yeah,
to make you feel less guilty.
definitely.
But obviously it worked too well and I needed to cut back.
Yeah, and like that's the other thing. You don't want to overburden yourself. And I did the same thing. I didn't use My Plate. I actually looked at it. I also looked at it in MyFitnessPal. Ultimately, I settled on a Chronometer, which is just a web-based one, because
Uh-huh.
for no real good reason other than I started it for like a week and I didn't want to get rid of it because of a sunken cost fallacy, and then now I'm stuck with it. I still really like it, but
Right.
but it obviously doesn't have that great barcode thing. But luckily,
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't needed it that much because I don't eat that much packaged food. I eat a lot of home meals. I do a lot of
Right.
fruits and unfortunately not as much vegetables as I like, but I'm trying to be better about that. But my biggest thing with the food scale was just I was getting sick of the process that you're describing where, oh, is that a deck of cards, or oh, a serving is a fist. Is that really a fist? I don't know. I don't think you let me stick I got my fist in the food. I gotta wash that now. So I just got sick of that, and I said I'm just gonna measure everything and just have like a database of all the bowl weights in my house. And at this point, I've just gotten used to like, okay, this is how much 700 grams looks like. I still measure everything because that's fun for me because I'm like the kind of guy that just loves collecting data, as I said. But
Yeah, that's the important part too for me, was just making it easier for me to stick with.
yeah, and like
That was the biggest.
for me, I just do the same thing with an app. I just literally in 5 seconds, I can have the app open on my phone and start typing it in. But no, if I had to put it on like a piece of paper and then like copy it to like a computer at work or something like that would not be easy to keep to that schedule.
Right.
Yeah, so going off of that, like something else that I've been super into lately is time tracking.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any experience with time tracking?
No.
Okay, so like one of the big things for time tracking was I've always had a huge problem with after about 2.5 weeks of doing any project, which is just anything that has a goal in mind and is more short term in nature than like a goal like, oh, I want to have a nice life when I finish college or whatever.
Right.
Uh, like every time after like 2.5 weeks, I would get sick of the project and would want to move on, and I would always have a really big problem deciding what the new project would be, because either I wouldn't remember a project that I had given up on a year prior, or I would just be lazy, or
Uh-huh.
whatever. It would just be a massive problem for me, and I would go through like this boom bust cycle where I would be super productive on this 2.5 week cycle and feel great about life and be super happy and just be like, everything's going great. I have this awesome project. I'm staying up all night working on it and whatever. And then I'd be like for the next week, I'd be like, oh, this sucks. I'm wasting my time. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I'm doing nothing with my free time. I'm wasting my life away. And then I find a new project. But so I was sick of that happening, and I wanted to keep track of like all the projects I was giving up on in the past, and like see how much time I was investing into each of these things, and just have a better idea. So like I created an Excel table, and that has been something that I've done with it. But more so, the biggest thing that I've been tracking actually has been the amount of time I sleep, Because, like, as I was mentioning earlier, is sleep is a big thing for me because I feel very strongly that you can only be so efficient in your life. And if you've seen the kind, if you ever saw the kinds of stuff I do to be more efficient, like tracking like where I'm moving in the room, or like doing like a spin when I'm picking something up, so I can pick something up on the way around, or like just some of the crazy things that I've come up with to like get like that extra 0.9% of efficiency. Like,
Right.
there's only so much you can do, and like the little bit that you increase in efficiency, that increases minutes in your day. But
Right.
but if you can shave off an hour of two of your sleep every day, you have a massive amount that you're adding to your day every single time. And then people will argue, but doesn't that make you less productive in your day? Yes. But the effect that has, it makes you 90% of what you are or 80% of what you are. It doesn't make you 50% of what you are or like 20%. So, like, the net benefit from taking away something from your sleep, if you're available to, and like you're not being a crazy person and sleeping like 3 hours a night or something, it's worth it overall, and it's something that a lot more people should be thinking about doing.
Hmm. Yeah. See, my problem is, as a functioning uh, cyclical insomniac, where I have periods of time where I just cannot
You
sleep.
know what? Insomniacs always hate it when I say this. I talked to this about Nathaniel too, and like he hates it when I say this as well.
Daniel and I are nighttime buddies, where usually if I'm having an insomniac episode, he's also up having the same issues. So he's one of my go-to people for it's 3 a.m. and my brain won't shut off. So like for me necessarily that wouldn't really help.
Yeah.
But like definitely see for someone who doesn't struggle with those same issues how it could be effective, because the logic is definitely sounds there that the net gain is worth more than the cost, because the cost can be kind of made up with things like caffeine, which I deeply enjoy a good cup of coffee too many times a day, most likely. But that's beside the point. But yeah, no, I can definitely see the logic there. Just for me personally, not the best idea. I need to take the sleep when I can get it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in your search, like insomniacs are the only people I wouldn't recommend this to because it's silly. Like
Right.
you have the opposite problem. You want to sleep
I
more. I want to sleep less.
Right. My biggest problem though is like with a lot of people are like, why don't you just take sleep replacement,
Oh
not
no,
replacements, but sleep
those
aids like
that's
melatonin
not good.
things or Benadryl. And my issue is I won't wake up in time because I have to wake up so early to get ready for the day and things like that. That by the time that I've
Yeah, you would have to be too
taken the
exact.
by the time the aid has kicked in and I'm actually asleep, and I can't get out of sleep,
Yeah.
and that becomes an issue because I'm running late and then I'm just more panicked than I was to begin with. But for I would definitely see why for a neurotypical person that would really benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, and it is so hard to get that to be exact with when you're taking in like it just hitting it right on the spot and be like, okay, if I
Right.
do not take it exactly 9 o'clock, I'm going to I'm gonna wake up too late, and then like it's 9:30, and you're like, oh crap, I missed it, and like
Or if I take 3/4 of this pill and 2/3 of this pill, I will wake up on
yeah,
time.
but if I take 4/5, we're done.
We're done. We're done. So at some point, it just like might as well just be extra tired for a couple of days, because eventually my body will just get so exhausted and I'll just pass out.
Yeah, definitely.
Slept more in class this past semester than I think I have in the past previous 3 years of my education. I don't know what went wrong, but I have fallen asleep, not to my academic disadvantage. It's usually after tests or quizzes, but I don't know what it is this year. I'm just extra tired this year.
Yeah, the only class I ever had a problem with that in was Dr. Lloyd's, and I think we all had that experience. But that was a bad call to do video presentations in his class with the lights off,
Right,
especially for a first period class. That's not happening.
right.
And like I'm not the kind of person to fall asleep in class, but if you do that and you just have all those factors working against you,
Uh-huh.
that's not happening, buddy. But yeah, but when do you wake up in the morning?
Usually I wake up at around 5:30 and then I leave around 6:30.
Oh, okay. That's pretty similar to me, to be honest. I wake up
Uh,
at I try to wake up at 5. Usually wake up at 5:30,
Uh-huh.
and then leave at 6:20. But yeah,
Right.
yeah, like it's weird for those people that like they either don't go to calf morning or heck don't even have a first period. And like they're talking about, oh, I had to get up at 8 this morning, and I'm like, geez, I was leaving for school
Which,
when it was dark out.
right. Yeah, and like my mom's always like, can't you just not go to cab morning? But see, the thing is, I can use cab morning, A, for academic things, and B, to kind of ease myself into the day. It gives me a little bit of time to finish waking up and becoming a functioning member of society again. So I like that little bit of more relaxed time in the morning because it gives me that chance to actually wake up. So I probably shouldn't be driving as sleepy as I do sometimes, but I haven't crashed into anyone yet, and I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, I've had that experience when when like I just go a night without sleeping, and then yeah, that's scary. But especially when
Right.
like you actually just like blink out and you're like, oh my god, like I don't remember anything from the past 15 seconds. But
Right.
yeah, like no, that's scary. But
Hmm.
I wish I was able to drink coffee or something. Well, do I? Not really. To be actually no. Let me rephrase that. Coffee would solve my problems, but I can't drink coffee because I'm not gonna say I have an addictive personality, but I'm the kind of guy that if he started drinking coffee, I just would never sleep and I would probably kill myself or something of a caffeine overdose.
It's surprising I have not done that to myself yet
Yeah,
because I, at this point, have recognized and realized that I have a legitimate caffeine addiction to the point where, like, if I don't drink enough caffeine for a couple of days, I will get headaches and whatnot.
yeah,
But at this point, there's no point trying to wean myself off of it, so might as well just continue down this path that I've already set myself on, you know?
yeah. At least until you can get a lifestyle change.
Right, which right now, waking up at 5:30 in the morning every day is not going to happen.
Yeah, but no, like I just am not capable of responsibly using those things, and like I would be the worst person if I was on like a lifelong medication. I'd be like, oh, what the hell? Let's just have all like just do something stupid like that for no
Right.
reason. Just because also I always talk about this with people, and we'd probably have to get into it another time because we're already running long. But like my biggest problems are like I am a I'm a bad risk taker.
Uh,
I don't know why, but I have a problem with taking risks for absolutely no reason other than taking risks. And
right.
then I'm also crap, I forgot the other thing. I was trying to remember the other thing while I was saying that. I don't know. But I also have problems with OCD, so that's not great, but yeah.
Hmm.
But you know how that goes.
Yeah. See, my thing with medication is over time, with the more mental health side of it, I've realized that there's been times where like I'll forget to take my meds for a couple of days, and then something bad will happen. I'll be like, oh yes, that's right. That's why they put me on those things. It wasn't just for show. No, it does actually have a purpose. So after a while, I got good at making sure I keep track of those things because the effects of not keeping on top of those things were very tangible and noticed quickly. So for me, just again out of necessity more than anything else, I'm able to keep up with those more risk kind of things where like, oh yeah, no, I actually do need to do this thing because it's good for me.
Yeah,
Which
no,
kind of goes back to the weight thing. Like I noticed how quickly in the beginning I shed weight. Like I lost in the first couple of months, I lost like 10 pounds, and then it took me a couple more months after that to lose. I guess it's like the first 2 months I dropped 10 pounds, and then the other 4, it took me to drop the other 10. But like the point was, I realized how quickly and how much better I felt when I started doing this. So for me, it's those tangible effects where I can like see, oh yeah, this actually does work. That's helped me self discipline.
yeah, definitely, and yeah, it's really important what am I saying? It's really important. I was going to mention how you're really lucky that like it becomes a tangible effect after only a few days. Because the problem for a lot of people is like they'll take a medication for a while and then they'll start weaning themselves off of it or something when they're not supposed to, and then
Right.
they won't notice the difference because it's a long term thing and it's like the frog that's being boiled in the
Pot where if you turn the water up too quickly, it'll realize what you're doing. But if you just turn it up slowly, it'll be complacent.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's just a huge risk with that kind of stuff, and Yeah, well, your mental illness scares me really badly, to be honest, because it's just the ultimate thing that I can't understand because I don't understand the subconscious enough. But,
Right.
I mean, yeah, just what do you do?
You learn to live with it.
Exactly.
It's a learning curve. It's a 3-year learning curve for me. I'm just now getting good at it.
Yep, that's how it goes. I think I'm gonna call it right here. I think we have some great stuff to go on for next time. And
Definitely. I
yeah,
very much enjoyed this conversation. I've enjoyed being on the podcast. This has been so much fun. I'm glad we finally got to catch up and, talk again.
well,
So, all stuff today. Productive use of time. Did not waste time here today.
well, if you guys thought it was a productive use of time as well to listen to this 3-hour podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star review. I couldn't imagine you guys not enjoying it if you made it this far in, unless you're one of those crazy book readers that just skips to the last page so that they can have all the spoilers to
Oh, I
spoil
could
for.
never do that to myself.
I don't understand those people either. But yeah, do that. Give us a written review. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell as well. Click on all the videos so that we get those quick views. Apparently, it takes like 15 seconds to get a view, so, it's not that big of a commitment. And yeah, thanks for listening, and keep on. Alright.